Now that I see some of your Discord usernames, I definitely recognize EJ from the Fantasy Critic server.
Oh, shit.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Here it comes.
Uh-oh.
Now we can devour gods together.
Not to say like you're infamous or anything, but I recognize the profile picture.
I try to mind my P's and Q's over there. Not so much over here with our buddies, but...
Console Crusade Podcast. I am Chris Gillyfor, here as always with Nick Durheim.
Hello, hello.
And EJ Olson.
I'm not used to being third in line.
I love you, big guy. We've got a very special guest today. As listeners of this show know, we have gone in the last 4 years way down the Fantasy Critic rabbit hole. We are joined today by Steve Fallon, software developer and the creator of Fantasy Critic himself. Steve, I'm so excited to have you today.
It's great to be here. Thanks, everybody.
Context ended up in a side league outside of Console Crusade that's a full counterpick league where you draft.
How dare you.
We drafted like 7, counterpick 7. So all the games are counterpicked and it's hookah break above even. And I'm in this league with Steve. I am not having a good go of it so far. And that is what that is. But I thought like, yeah, I got, we're here, we're in this league together. I'll shoot by shot, reach out and just say, hey, we get this podcast. We've been doing the league for a while. We'd love to have you come on. And so that's super exciting. And here we are.
You really got to twist my arm to talk about Fantasy Critic. It's like one of my least favorite subjects to talk about, seriously.
Yeah, well, we definitely are going to have probably a lot to talk about. You said you listened to a few episodes, but we initially 2 years ago, we tried to keep it a quarterly thing. We just do an update every quarter, and then we have our wrap up at the end of the year. Then we do our draft, and it's spaced out. This year, I think we've talked about it either in depth or close to it, probably every week of the year, and we're at March 10th right now. So it's been active for sure.
I mean, to be truthful, like that was kind of a design goal of Fantasy Critic, is just to keep people engaged in games and thinking about games in a way that they might not normally, and hearing about games that they might not normally hear about. Like that was definitely my intention.
That's fantastic.
It's working. That is for sure.
We're going to talk a lot about Fantasy Critic. We've got some questions. We got a couple real like data heads, spreadsheet heads, guys who like to get in the weeds, who are really eager to pick your brain. And I know you mentioned just before we kicked off that like you've got some questions for us, and God help me, I'd love to hear the episodes when we get around to talking about Fantasy Critic, what episodes you listen to. Cause that could be pretty funny. First, so just to kind of get everybody in space together, want to kick it off with one of our typical segments, and that's what we've been playing. Steve, I understand that you just finished off something that one of our co-hosts really loves and that the other two co-hosts really historically have not. And I am very excited for dear Nick to get to talk about something with somebody else from a place of experience and not like, guys, please try it. I promise, guys, it's good, guys. Tell us about your time with Elden Ring, man.
Yeah, so I finished Elden Ring like 2 weeks ago, maybe a little less. Played like 70-ish hours of it, I think. How are we on? I think the game's 2 years old now. Are we good on spoiler?
I'd say go for it,
Please.
I really liked it. This was the third FromSoft game that I played. When Elden Ring came out, that was the point where I said, okay, this whole series is too popular, too important for me to have never played any of them. I had never played Dark Souls. I'd never played Bloodborne, any of them when Elden Ring came out. And so when Elden Ring came out, I played Dark Souls, and then I played Bloodborne, and now I'm finally getting around to Elden Ring. And I've loved all three. But Elden Ring specifically, it does a lot of things that I've been looking for a game to do. I'm a big fan of the two recent Zelda games, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but one of my complaints, particularly with Breath of the Wild, and not quite as much with Tears of the Kingdom, but still a bit, is that there is some really, really cool stuff in Breath of the Wild, like specifically the part where you come across the dragon on the mountain, and you have to free the dragon from the Ganon Blight and all that. Super, super cool. And the reward is 1/4 of a heart or 1/4 of a stamina piece. And like the reward almost makes the thing less interesting. Whereas Elden Ring has much more unique and interesting rewards for the various cool things. Like specifically what I'm thinking about here is, and you'll know what I'm talking about. There's this whole section of Elden Ring where you just keep going deeper and deeper. You're in the sewers under Lanedale specifically, and you keep going down, and you do this horrifically annoying platforming section. And if you do all that, you get a unique ending. And that is something that I really wish that the Zelda games would do, where if you find this thing that the game is not going to tell you about, because there's plenty of things to find that the game doesn't tell you about, and the reward is just never that interesting. And part of that's the weapon system, that nothing's permanent, and part of that's just there's not that much that they could add that is interesting, because of the way the systems work. So Elden Ring does that better than almost any game I've ever played.
I feel so seen right now. You are echoing every criticism I have of the modern Zelda games, which I liked and loved the new one, but it's exactly how I feel about those games. I haven't played Elden Ring though, so I'll kick it back to Nick here.
Yeah, FromSoft is extremely confident, and they just do not give a shit if you do not find extra endings. The reward often for Elden Ring is the experience itself. I think a lot of that is similar to Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, in that the thing you get from Elden Ring, a lot of times, like if you're doing the extra dungeons, you're not really getting something wildly interesting. You might get a new weapon, and that's cool because all the weapons are great. And you're like, oh, I finally found a ultra great sword that has bleed, and that's the build that I'm going for. So that's great. Or you could find, a scythe that is magic damage, so it's worthless to you. But the thing that you just did was worth it in itself.
Elden Ring definitely has a little bit of problems with repeated content. But it takes a while for you to notice that things are repeating. And there's enough things that don't, and enough things that are unique and interesting, or that have unique rewards, where you can justify, let me check out this cave because, only 2 out of the past 5 have been uninteresting. So this one might be good. So that's this kind of thing that only works in the first playthrough. I know a lot of people have talked about how Elden Ring doesn't hold up on a second playthrough nearly as well. But honestly, that doesn't bother me. Some of my favorite games are games that are hard to replay. Outer Wilds comes to mind for sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is probably like FromSoft veterans thinking back to their experience replaying through or doing New Game Plus on Bloodborne and Dark Souls, and how the scaling on those games is a little bit easier to justify and to like tune because they're not open worlds. Elden Ring sort of being, it is open world, but it's also still very traditional Dark Souls in a lot of ways.
But also in Dark Souls and Bloodborne, outside of, like speedrun strategies, there's not so much optional content, not nearly to the extent of Elden Ring. Like, if you want to do a minimal playthrough of Dark Souls and you're not doing speedrun strategies, you're still going to play most of the game. You can do a minimal run of Elden Ring if you know exactly where to go in a fraction of the time that you would the first time you're playing it.
That's something that I haven't really thought about too much, just because I haven't gone back and done New Game Plus and Elden Ring. Mostly because I wanted to play the DLC and I didn't want to have that be on New Game Plus difficulty, and I didn't want to worry about copy pasting a save file on Steam. But yeah, there is so much stuff that I did a lot of the bosses. I think I fought all the bosses. I don't know if I did all the dungeons necessarily. I probably did most of them. My playthrough was, I want to say, 130 hours. So I was in the lands between. I lived there for a while.
Yeah, and that's like my favorite kind of game. My favorite kind of game is, we can talk about this particular take of mine as well, but a game that makes you feel like you know the map. Totally. You've placed yourself in this world and you know where things are in relation to other things. Ideally, you don't even need to look at the map to get around. That's what's like perfect when a game does that for me. I recognize that Elden Ring is so big that it probably wouldn't work without fast travel, but I do really appreciate a game that has enough confidence in its movement system or the way that the map interconnects that it won't give you a fast travel system. I actually really like that. Or it's a more minimal fast travel system, not like Elden Ring where you can go pretty much anywhere from literally anywhere, which is what the modern Zelda games are too. But a game like Hollow Knight, where there is fast travel, but you still have to go to the fast travel spots. I like a game like that for sure.
Oh, you're speaking my language now, getting into the Metroidvania lands. About 50 episodes ago, we're getting ready to revisit it for episode 150, but we did a top 100 where we all were able to offer games and rank games, and based on mutual playing and who liked what and where things kind of settled out. How Hollow Knight ended up being
Arguing.
number one. Yeah, arguing. Oh my God, it's like a 5-hour podcast. EJ has to take a break in the middle because he's just so fed up with both of us. But Hollow Knight ended up number one for a lot of the reasons you just expressed. Like, it checks a lot of the boxes amongst our various interests, and it's challenging but not unfair. It is fun to explore and be in, and like you said, feel like you know the map, because unless you have a certain charm equipped, you can't even necessarily see your position on the map in Hollow Knight. So you've got to have that knowledge of which corridors to avoid and which ones to go back to. And oh God, that game is so good. Silksong 2024.
Keep dreaming.
I'm simultaneously a huge Hollow Knight fan and getting to be a bit of a Silksong doubter, because it has been so long that it's hard to believe that the development is going the way they intended.
People played it. It was demoed. It was playable at PAX. It was playable at E3. What was that, 2019? Like, it was so long ago that it's hard to even imagine. Like, it was so long ago.
We had COVID.
Is it the same game? Can't be.
Extenuating circumstances here, guys.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair. And you gotta trust them too, because they did make one of the best games ever made. So
yeah, I'm not saying that it's going to be bad, but I think that there is reason for hesitancy at this point.
Yeah.
I certainly haven't drafted it in Fantasy Critic. I don't think ever, actually, because it went from I don't think it's ready to I don't want to be on this ship. I don't want to be on this boat. I'm sure that one of you has been on this boat every year. Silksong is actually a bit worse to draft than a normal will not release, because you are not going to know that it's not coming out. That game is going to be, who knows, until December 31st.
their communication is very minimal. Steve, I wanted to ask you really quickly, because you mentioned that you played Dark Souls and Bloodborne. How do you feel about those games in comparison to Elden Ring?
I think I still like Dark Souls the best. That's the first one I played. I'm a big fan of Metroidvanias, and that one is the most 3D Metroidvania with the interconnected world. I don't know if there's been any Souls-likes that have quite that level of interconnected world since then. Like, Elden Ring is just so open that, like, Lanedale is almost a mini Dark Souls inside of Elden Ring, because that's such a big dungeon. And it connects to other dungeons, etc. But yeah, Dark Souls is still my favorite. I appreciate the lore of these games, and at the same time, I find that most of the intrigue about the stories is the fact that they're so hard to put together. I think that the storytelling is more interesting than the story itself. Once you get it all pieced together, it's like, that's neat.
There's a lot of sad people and very fucked up things happening in this place.
Yeah.
But yes, the storytelling being very grim and not telling you anything. So you're watching a YouTube video, you're watching Vati video or something, you're like, wow, yeah, that is a cool story. But the vibes, the feeling. My favorite thing about video games that aren't really mimicked in other mediums is that it's really about the place. It's about the setting. That is the main character of these games. And it's you exploring. You're talking about, like, if I close my eyes, I can, like, walk through most of Dark Souls out. I would still get lost, but it's the memory of playing through that game and being in that place that is so tied, like, inextricably for that experience for me. So I don't have that as much with Elden Ring, because it is so wide open and there was so much fast travel and they encouraged it and they made that an option. So I was going to use it, but I don't think I can really ever, like, I love Elden Ring. It was great. It was huge. It was fantastic. The legacy dungeons were all really, really great. They were all mini Dark Souls, like you were talking about. At the end of the day, I still think I'm going to like Bloodborne and Dark Souls. I played Dark Souls 3 first. I would recommend that game a lot. It doesn't have the same kind of interconnectivity that Dark Souls 1 has, but it's still a really fantastic game, and some of the best boss designs are in that game as well.
Yeah, I would consider playing Dark Souls 3, although honestly, I think the Souls like I want to play the most that I haven't played is probably Lies of P, actually.
Really?
A couple friends of mine really liked that game.
Not to dive onto Fantasy Critic too soon here, but Lies of P has kind of taken on a life of its own. I've noticed in the server over there. It's going to be 2024 Lies of P,
Right.
because people expected that game to be bad.
Certainly some did. I mean, I can pull up the counterpick numbers on it. That game has some, a reasonable amount of counterpicks. And then, I mean, I think it has an 82. Like, it actually didn't, like, set the world on fire, but...
Middling, some might say.
But good.
But for a first-time dev and in a genre that historically gets a lot of swings and misses,
Yeah.
it's understandable that it got a lot of counterpicks.
I infamously drafted it in our Whammy League last year, which was our Race to the Bottom League. And that, I learned.
Oops.
It was counterpicked in 21% of leagues.
Wow.
In 2023.
That's pretty high.
Counterpicked in 21% of leagues where it was picked.
I've been thinking about what you said, Steve, about games where you don't even need the map. And I was digging through the archives here, trying to figure out, do I even have a game like that? And honestly, sticking with the theme of open world, I feel that way about Skyrim. I think that had more to do with like the incentive that game gave me to actually explore, that I didn't want to fast travel. I didn't want to look at the map. I just wanted to be in that world in a way that something like The Witcher 3, which is also a Console Crusade Top 100 video game, by the way, a franchise that did not encourage fast travel until The Witcher 3. And they did the same thing I think Hollow Knight did, where you had these outposts you had to go to in order to fast travel to other outposts. In that world, I didn't feel like, not that it was all the same or generic or copy and paste it. I didn't feel that way, but I didn't feel like immersed in the world the way I was in something like The Elder Scrolls. Obviously, very different kind of game than something like Hollow Knight, but thinking about something like Elden Ring, these games can get so big that it's impossible to do what you were saying and immerse players to the point that they can remember everything in a world that big.
Two that come to mind for me, and they're a little different because one does have a map, but Firewatch. Have any of you played Firewatch?
I have not.
Okay, because have you heard of it?
Yes.
Firewatch is, I really like that game. And it gives you an option when you start the game to turn off your current position on map. When you pull up your map, it's diegetic, like your character holds the map in front of the camera.
Oh, very cool.
And he's also holding a compass. And by default, the paper map shows a live updating you are here. But there's an option when you start the game and play without that. And if you play without it, you have to look at the map and look at the compass and look at your surroundings and figure out where you are the way you would if you actually were in a national park in, I believe, the 1980s pre-GPS. And I loved playing the game like that. That was definitely an example of you get to know the lay of the land.
Yeah, I love that. I try to do minimal HUD most times. Like both Zelda games of recent release, I played not master mode, but the no HUD. All you can see is your hearts. Like that's the only thing that pops up on there. So no mini map, no distracting sort of, oh, here's where you should be going. Like I want to decide where I'm going with my face, not my eyes staring at the bottom right corner of my screen at all times.
I have a lot of respect for that. I'm so side quest pilled, and so I'm like, where's my Koroks? Where's my? Although that's a topographic feature I haven't explored. Like, oh, I stamped these places. I want to see where that is, and I'm sick. I'm sick in that regard.
I'm right in the middle where it's like, again, something like Skyrim where you have the compass at the top, and so you kind of like, okay, I know where I need to go for my current objective, or I can turn that off, whatever. I'm in the world. Something like The Witcher where you're always looking at that corner mini map, and I had to turn it off. And it wasn't until it came to PC and it got some mods where you can actually mod in a compass or even like a waypoint system where if you go into your Witcher senses, you see your waypoint, but otherwise no HUD, because that's so distracting. You end up just looking in that little corner and your position on the map, and that's what you're looking at the whole time, and not the world that these people have spent years designing.
I actually feel that way about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom a bit. Not as far as looking at the mini-map, but as far as you're constantly looking at your stamina wheel. As you're running from place to place, you're just watching the wheel tick down and then come back up and then tick down. It's actually something I really like about Death Stranding, is that Death Stranding, you are looking at the environment, looking at for things you might trip on, not trying to manage your stamina meter because there isn't one. Not like traditional running stamina meter in Death Stranding, at least.
That's a really interesting way to go about things, is to give you less bars and numbers and more just in-world explanations of what's going on. A game that I want to play but haven't played, but always heard people mention in this sort of context as well, is Dead Space, and how your ammo and your health meter is on the character itself, so you're not like looking in the bottom right corner. You can still see how much health you have, but it makes more sense that this guy who's on a ship, the ship is going to tell you where to go. Sort of like if you're at an airport and there's like little lines on the ground that tell you what gate you to go to. So the ship does that for you. It tells you where to go next because there's a guy in the chair that's telling you, oh, Isaac, you have to go to this place down the hall to the left. So the ground will light up and you can like toggle that on and off. I just think that's a really hard thing to do, and you can't shoehorn it into every game. Obviously, there's the Twitter discussions about yellow painted rocks, and that's, it's a meme both ways. People complain about it.
That's
they get too mad.
Me,
they get
truthfully
too defensive. Yeah, I mean, it depends. It depends on the context, obviously, but
I mean, I like the Uncharted games and the newer Tomb Raider games, and those like are the hallmarks of that. So
yeah, it can be tough to, like Nick, like you said, trying to shoehorn that into every game. But the Ubisoft open world sort of being branded is a bad thing in 2024 when we're looking at how games are being developed, and that's sort of their hallmark. It's like maximum HUD, 1 million checkpoints and waypoints on the map, and it's so over the top. And so when a developer is able to be creative like that and build it into the world and not only makes you, I mean, you're more immersed, you're interacting with the world more intentionally, but sometimes just having to think more critically instead of just like, let me pull up another menu, another checklist to peruse through. So, Steve, anything else you've been playing?
Symphony of the Night, actually. Another one similar to when I finally got around to Dark Souls. It's an example of this game's too important for me to have never played. It's too important for two games, a genre that I love, for me to have never played. Like, Metroid is probably my favorite series.
Oh my god! One of us! My cat's name is Samus. My cat's name is Ridley.
Oh, that's fun.
My people!
The Metroid games are great, and I've played, plenty of other Metroidvanias, but I've never played the Vania half of Metroidvania. I've played Super Castlevania 4 with heavy save stating, I'll admit, because that game's super hard. But I'm almost done with Symphony of the Night now.
Awesome. I've only ever played like the first half hour of that game, so I do not have a lot of context for that. I played some of the games after Symphony of the Night, the Game Boy Advance ones in particular, also not all the way through, but just sort of seeing that evolution of Igarashi and his design sort of impact on the Castlevania games. How do you think it holds up? I mean, I'm guessing you're probably playing like the Requiem collection.
Yeah, the PS4 version. I like it. I think it's very good. Another, like, I don't think we care about spoilers for a game from 1997. Have any of you played it in its entirety?
No.
Okay. Do you know about the inverted castle?
Yeah.
That's like the main twist is that you basically play through the game twice. And that's where I am now. I'm almost done with that section. But I imagine that figuring that out in 1997 was super, super cool. Especially, most people, or at least a lot of people, didn't have internet. And, it was certainly not as easy to find that sort of thing in 1997, no doubt. But the actual mechanics of getting through the inverted castle is not as polished as the main castle because, when you're doing the regular castle, every jump is sized for either the single jump or the double jump if they expect you to need the double jump for this jump. In the inverted castle, the jumps are all what they ended up being based on the fact that they rotated the map 180 degrees. And there's an ability you get where you turn into a bat and you can fly. And what you end up doing is using it constantly in the inverted castle because almost every jump is slightly out of range of a double jump. So you end up shifting into bat form constantly. So it's not as good as the first half of the game, but it is a neat thing to find.
Are there extra bosses in that section?
Yeah, there's extra bosses. Yeah.
This is part of the normal pathing through the game, or this is something that you can unlock with certain conditions?
It's both, because you do the if you just like go through the game and do what appears to be the final boss, you get an ending. But I imagine even to people in 1997 without internet, they were like, feels like something's missing. Like, I don't think that was the real final boss. Like, I didn't fight Dracula, and I didn't fight that guy from the beginning that took all my items away. So what happened to all that? And you have to, go get 2 items and then go get a 3rd item and then fight the final boss a different way, and then you unlock the inverted castle, which lets you do the true final boss.
That's cool.
It's one of those things too, right? Where it's like it's like a 200+% playthrough if you do the
Yes.
inverted castle.
Yeah.
Which is, for some reason, the percent wars of the 90s were so hilarious.
Yeah, I won't be going for 100% on this one. I very rarely 100% a game.
No, I mean, with something like with Castlevania and all the drops, I mean, I did a lot of farming when I played through Bloodstained, and that's kind of similar. That's like more of them trying to do another Symphony of the Night a little bit. Like, they don't do the inverted castle, but they eventually you get an ability that inverts gravity. So then you're running around on the ceiling. So it's kind of similar in like the design aspect of it. But yeah, a lot of random drops from enemies and farming dudes just to get their dagger or whatever. So yeah, not worth it.
You guys are describing my worst nightmare, and this is well-tread territory on the podcast, my aversion to Metroidvania games. And it's funny because some of my favorite games are open world games, and so when I say truthfully that I am too easily paralyzed with choice, it's more about Metroidvania games making me feel like if I'm missing something, it was still necessary, in a way that open world games tend to just say, if you missed that, that's fine. You can just experience this over here and you're not missing too much. In a way that Metroidvania games, I'm always so intensely stressed out that like, well, if I don't go down that way, there's something super important that way. I just get too stressed to go down that rabbit hole.
Some of them are like so much shorter than most open world games, though. Like you can 100% Super Metroid in like a fifth of the time it takes you to play Skyrim.
That is true. I can't even imagine trying to 100% a game like Skyrim. Like that's such a different world. But I played through Guacamelee and I liked that game, and that was much more bite-sized. I enjoyed that game quite a bit. But otherwise, I feel like every Metroidvania game that I've come to, especially for the podcast, we played through Metroid Prime Remastered last year.
How far did you end up getting in Dread?
I think I only beat one boss in Dread. Yeah, I didn't get terribly far. They've been more like exercises in like understanding my friends and their taste than it is something that I've done like and had a good time with.
Sure.
And I'm always like looking for that next, like we said, Hollow Knight is the number 1 on our top 100. I played that game for an hour. So
Oh, really? Okay. I was going to say, if there's any one, it would probably be Hollow Knight. The worst thing about playing Hollow Knight first, as far as Metroidvanias, is that I don't think that you'll find it, like everything else will be somewhat of a letdown after that, because it's kind of so to this point, the peak, I think.
It is, but it's also so unfriendly to someone like EJ, who is not into a game to find things. He is into a game to experience things. I mean, that's the kind of, we've tried to nail down what he likes and why he likes them, but we're still figuring it out as a community. We're working on it together. He is our white whale.
As nebulous as ever. Hey, I've been playing games, and it's not just Warzone, okay? Playing real games.
What are you playing, EJ?
I started Celeste, which I had almost beaten to completion like during COVID, and then Animal Crossing came out, and so I never went back to Celeste because I put 500 hours into Animal Crossing like a sicko. But we talked about, Chris, you had gotten it for a really good deal, so we talked about revisiting that before the top 100 revisit. Because from my memory, I'm thinking that game probably would make it onto the list because it is one of the, without a doubt, one of the best modern action platforming games. And Nick, you had said you would kind of bounce off it, so we agreed to all revisit that. So I played through the first chapter last night. You guys know I'm a little bit platinum trophy pilled. So of course I look it up. I've resolved to play through the game, start to finish again, without assist mode, and then go back to clean things up. And even on the first chapter, which I think took probably 45 minutes to beat, and I'm trying to 100% everything as I go, this is the intro level. And so I'm thinking, I'm going to blow through this, no problem. And I get to the end of the level, and I'm like 10 of 20 strawberries, whatever. I'm
man.
like, what? I thought I cleaned this out, man. How is it 10 of 20?
This is a very difficult game to 100%. Like, you can beat it. It's a hard game to beat, but it's doable. To 100% Celeste is really hard.
Challenge accepted.
Not just the execution, but finding the strawberries, which was probably the thing that was like, the thing I like the least about Celeste is not knowing where the strawberries were. And if I want to go back and clean up, I have to play through the entire level again. And those are long levels.
Yeah.
Those levels took me 45 minutes to an hour to complete, just like blind. I could probably do it a little bit faster now that I know the mechanics and I'm more familiar with it. But to go back and like I don't know. I don't remember which rooms I didn't go to the previous time. There is no map.
Yeah.
So I would have to watch a guide, have to watch a YouTube video or something, and that would just destroy the experience for me. So I'm just not going to finish the game by getting all the strawberries and doing the farewell and doing all the B and C sides. Like, that's not what I'm going to do. I beat the game. I'm fine with that. I'm over. It's done.
The messaging, as far as like when there might be a hidden screen below or off to the right or something, is really inconsistent. Sometimes you see like a block of ice that you assume that you can dash through. Sometimes you just have to take a leap of faith. And I like that it does like the Meat Boy thing of like infinite lives. If you die, you just reset. Great. It's all about the challenge. No artificial like you have 14 lives to do this. Like just let me overcome the challenge of this screen, please. So sometimes you're just dashing into the void hoping, well, there might be a screen down here. I don't know, because they're not messaging it clearly or consistently. So that is a gripe with the game, but I'm excited to get through it again. I'm excited to hopefully beat it this time. And I'm excited for Chris to play it, and we can revisit that in a couple weeks, and we'll see.
I am so curious as to what Chris will think about this game, considering his objections to what you called grind your dick in the ground hard games like Meat Boy. I mean, this is harder than Meat Boy.
It's not harder than
in my
Meat
opinion.
Boy. That's crazy.
You didn't beat the game. I beat the game. I beat this and I beat Meat Boy, and it's harder than Meat Boy.
All right. I'll reserve my. I didn't come close to beating Meat Boy. I got through maybe 5 worlds.
Then what the fuck are you talking about, man?
I played those two games like 7 years apart, so I can't really say which one is tougher, but they're both hard, no doubt.
I don't know that I hate games that are hard. I hate games that feel hard because that's the design philosophies we want to make it hard. I like games that are tough but fair. Like Cuphead, I did not think I was going to like because it was advertised as being this like really fucking hard run and gun platformer. But when I actually got into it, I went, oh, every time I am dying, it is 100% my fault. And I know exactly why it's my fault. And when I do this level or this boss again, I know exactly what I need to try to do better so that when I do beat it, I know it's because I got that good run where I hit everything the way I needed to, hit all my parries, made sure to save my supers for the right moment. Future top 100 game, Cuphead, definitely.
Add that to the list.
Celeste belongs in that category for sure. Like, Celeste is low to no RNG, as far as I know.
You might get a little bit of jank if you're doing the Pico 8 version of it. I definitely did, with it not being very forgiving at the pixel perfect jumps. But no, I don't think there's anything really RNG related. Maybe if you get unlucky with like the wind on some of those wind levels, but it's all pretty much in your control.
The literal controls are, I think, close to perfect.
I'm not a big fan of holding a button to climb. It took me a while to like dial that in, changing button controls around. But that was just me being unhappy with it controlling compared to the way I wanted it to control, less about its problems. That's a me problem, not the game's problem.
Aren't there multiple options for how the climb works? Like, can't you just like hit the stick and then you're stuck on the wall until you decide to release?
No, if you're just holding against the wall, you're sliding down because it's waiting for a wall jump. Because there's wall jumps and that doesn't take up your climb stamina. I don't know. It's just a design choice that it kind of bumped up against me. Same with like the physics and how if you let go of your direction button in midair, you stop very quickly. And I'm used to playing like Mario games where you're going to just keep going for a while. You're going to drift. So that kind of got a little, this is more of a precision platformer, I would say, compared to Meat Boy. Meat Boy is very kinetic and you're running, you're dashing all the time. And it's like more of a rhythm game. Whereas this is more of like a line yourself up, get your input correct for your dash because you want to dash vertical, but you're going to do an accidental angle dash and you're going to be very unhappy with yourself. And you're going to have to redo this several times because you got very far in this like stage, this screen. You hadn't been this far before, so now you're sweaty.
Nick, you beat this game.
Yes, I beat this game 2 nights ago. I had only gotten to, I want to say, the 3rd stage before dropping it previously. And because of Chris picking it up and EJ talking about playing it, I had the FOMO, so I decided, well, I just beat a action RPG from 2012 for the PSP, so the only logical step after that is to play a hard as nails precision platformer before I play Unicorn Overlord, which is a very anime like tactics RPG. So I jumped in and I played through Celeste in like 2 nights. I want to say my total game time was like 8.5 hours. I never really got over the climbing part. I think the climbing is the absolute worst part of the game. All the levels that are designed primarily around the dash and the wall jump I think are better than any of the levels that you're relying more on the climb. Totally cromulent experience. I don't know if what I would rank it at, or if this like cracks my personal top whatever, but it was a good game and I think it was worth playing. And I could see this being a very informative and important game that others will take inspiration from for the next, I don't know, 20 years.
Especially considering that like this is a genre that just doesn't really do well outside of Nintendo.
Right, for sales and review performance.
Right. So it's nice to see something break through.
Nick, you're like a third of the way into the stuff you've been playing recently. You beat Celeste. You were playing the aforementioned mid-tier PSP RPG, which I'd love to hear about your sort of final thoughts on after we touched on it last week. And now getting into Unicorn Overload. But yeah, how was your Trails of the Heroes of I can't remember which sub spin-off you were in.
Clearly, how can you forget? It is The Legend of Nayuta Boundless Trails that I played, the PSP gem, which I was totally wrong. I thought this was way older than what actually is. It's from 2012. So, man, that's just a weird time for Japanese RPGs, and the PSP as a platform at that point. That is the year the Vita came out, I think. So that was like the dying days of PSP. But yeah, I ended up liking that game quite a lot. It's definitely, like I said, is very mid-tiered. It's very 7 out of 10 vibes. But it was cozy. It was pretty quick. The feedback loop of going through these individual levels and finding a thing that lets you upgrade your shop so that you can buy better weapons to get more powerful. Like, it has a really satisfying loop and is paced really well as far as how you are getting stronger, and the enemies that you're encountering always generally feel like you can just kick their ass and take their names. It's no big deal. I ended up actually hitting a really weird difficulty spike near the very, very end, where it, like, after you die a few times, it's like, hey, do you want to kick the difficulty down? And at that point, like, I'm 30 hours into this game, like, yes, I just want to finish this. Like, I'm so close. Take it down. I don't care. And it did that an additional time. So I got kicked down to like easy mode so I could finish this game. But yeah, it was cozy. I mean, I don't know, like I said last week, I don't know if I would recommend it. I think Brandon would probably get a lot of joy out of this kind of game because he is very much into this, like, this sort of level of JRPG. This being more of like an action RPG. It was worth my time. But I don't know if I can say like too much glowing things about it besides that, but really addictive sort of soundtrack. It was a lot of earworms, mashy, cool.
That's wild that you had to bump twice. Because I was like, okay, 2012, I don't think, the JRPG market had fully moved on from that late game difficulty spike where you're just like, son of a bitch, like, I've been overpowered for like 3 dungeons, and here we go into the final one, and I am just in an absolute blender. But twice, that is crazy.
What I think sort of contributed to it as well is throughout the game, your sword combat, you can choose between a one-handed sword or a two-handed sword. So fast, less damage, slow, more damage. That's like the extent of your combat diversity. But you also get this like weird little fairy girl that's following you around, and you get projectiles and like different moves that you can do using magic, basically. And during this fight, she's gone, so you do not have the access to that sort of ranged attack, which I wasn't really using too much to begin with, but there's other abilities that you get with her that's like a shield and like a faster roll that does damage as well. So it took away a lot of my damaging arsenal, so I was relying heavily on just my sword combat. And it was like a side-to-side sort of 1v1 scenario. So it kind of gave me like Tales vibes, like Tales of Symphonia. It was more like a fighting game boss fight. And man, I just got my shit rocked, like, consistently. I ended up overcoming. What can I say? God gamer.
And you're a little bit into Unicorn Overlord. I know that your progress on the demo carries over, but maybe just in the interest of time, and I'm going to keep myself really brief on Rebirth here, we could save Unicorn Overlord for our next What We've Been Playing.
Yes, that's totally fine.
Super dope. Yeah, I've been playing one thing and one thing only. fellas, and that is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I just got to Costa del Sol, or Costa del Sol, I guess. I hate that.
It's always been Costa. What can I say?
I refuse. I mean, well, I don't, because they're saying it to me so
It's
many
like Costa
times.
Rica, man. Costa is a word.
I know, but isn't that supposed to be Costa Rica? I don't know. Like, Costa del Sol. I just got to Costa.
Like the coast.
I know. I don't know if that was just like an anglicizing of a word that is obviously not English or whatever. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I've just spent 2 minutes of my time talking about that instead of about this game. I'm having a great time with this game. I mean, y'all know me. I just talked about it earlier with I go absolutely rabid when you give me things to do on the map. And so I got to the Grasslands region, started chapter 2 after the flashback sequence at the Calm Inn, and immediately cleared everything in the Grasslands region before I moved on with the story. I got to the Junon region, I cleared everything before I moved on with the story. There were some things that I had to progress the story to reach, and so I did those, and then just kept clearing, and I'm having a great time. I think that they're doing a really nice job so far of breaking up this open world. Something that I saw in a number of reviews and like previews and sort of the game's out now. Let's sort of deep dive some stuff that we maybe didn't love as much. People talking about this having like a really bloated open world. So far, I don't see it. I know I am the market for this kind of game. And I'm not just out in the open world. Like, we get out into the grasslands, and the very next thing they're doing is shoving us into the mithril mines. And so it's a lot tighter. It's a lot more of sort of a traditional dungeon experience of exploring, probing around corners, looking for treasure. They're splitting up the party with some regularity. So my combat, like the variance in combat that I'm getting because they're asking me to use different configurations of different people, is super cool. It's keeping things from becoming stale because I have my party kind of locked. And then as soon as I get Yuffie, I'll like lock it down and get her in there and get Barrett out of town. And I just had like a whole chapter where you're just like on the boat to Costa del Sol and doing a card game tournament with Queen's Blood, which, holy shit, Queen's Blood is amazing. The card game in this, like, Final Fantasy games and their like spin-off card games, that's a love language to me because they're all good. Like, all of them are good. And this one is no exception. I am absolutely loving it. I think it kind of speaks to like the variety of stuff that you can do and why, again, like, I'm not getting fatigued with this. Yes, you have the categories of things that you will be able to do in every open world. There will be some new Queen's Blood players, which, like, gimme, because they continue to introduce new wrinkles to some of the things the cards can do that keep me guessing and make me think differently about the board and about strategies, which I appreciate. You've got good old towers to pop to get waypoints on the map, which you do not have to do. I mean, you do have to pop the towers, but all of those things, you can just go find them if you so choose. And I've had a good time just hitting the towers as I come by them and not rushing to the towers so that I can kind of poke around in corners and have some of my own discoveries, which I really like. And I find that even the areas where I'm like, this is really cool, but there's not anything up here, as you progress through some of the other like side quest lines, whether they're, you know, Cloud's Merc for Hire, side questing things, or coming out of stuff like the proto relics, which you're tracking, and they all have their own quest lines. It leads you to a lot of those corners. Like in the grasslands, for example, there's this big, beautiful beach, and I went down, I was like, oh, I have to go explore that. And there wasn't really anything down there except for some crafting materials. And I went, oh, okay. I felt kind of crummy about it. I was like, oh, damn, is this what this open world's going to be? But then later, after having found a couple of life springs where the live stream had kind of floated to the surface, that provided information about a rare monster that could only be found down there. And it was on the beach. It was like, oh, okay, so this was totally going to be used, but it's not just giving it everything to me at the beginning. So as you engage with some of the different things you could do in the overworld, more things become apparent. Like I said, there are quest lines kind of threading through things. It's all been pretty good variety. I'm having a good time. I'm having a good ass time. This feels like the promise of what this world was in, again, 1997. but realized in a way that I think always existed in their minds at Square Enix, but that they just were not able to do really in any capacity on the PlayStation 1, despite the fact, I mean, they did a lot that sort of revolutionized the genre, but this is what this has always been, I think, in so many of our imaginations, and I'm really enjoying my time in this world so far.
My one question for you is, did you or can you beat the wandering super boss guy in the desert region of that first grasslands area once you get out of Midgar and go to Calm?
Wandering desert guy.
So it is a big snake man.
Yeah, the Midgard Sormer. Yeah, that it's in the water.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, that's the first.
No. Not in the water, in the desert. It's like a cobra, and you have to be on a chocobo to outrun it in the original Final Fantasy VII. I don't know if it's even in this game.
I haven't been to a desert
that was
yet.
That was the thing. So once you get out of Midgar and you go to Calm, then you have to go to the chocobo farm. You got to get some greens. You got to go find a chocobo, tame it, to outrun this nasty snake that is just a silhouette shadow when you're in this like rocky desert region, to make it into the mines to traverse across into Junon after that.
Yes, in this game it is a swamp. You do have to get the chocobo to outrun the serpent in the swamp, and it is then the first boss. It's the final boss of that chapter, and it's a great fight.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a really it makes more sense for that to be the case, but that was like an unbeatable fight. That was a hard wall for you to be forced onto a chocobo in the original. So that's a really interesting way to interpret it and then reintroduce it to this generation of gamers.
Yeah, and I don't want to give any spoilery things with regards to the end of that fight, but they do.
I'm playing Rebirth right now. I mean, remake.
I said I'm not doing spoilers. But they nod. There is a nod in that direction. That's about as vague as I could be.
Cool.
Yeah, the combat. Last thing before we get out of here and start talking Fantasy Critic, the combat is so fucking good. It is such a great improvement on Remake, which I thought was like decent, but not fantastic. The variety of different abilities that you get pretty quickly on, and adding things like synergy abilities that you could just use at all times, depending on who's in your party, and then synergy skills, which take a certain number of ATB uses for each of the relevant party members. So like Synchro Rush is one that I use all the time with Cloud and Tifa. Both of them have to have used 3 ATB gauges on skills, items, magic, or something in the fight to then have that move become eligible. And they all do a ton of damage, and they all have really cool additional buffs or debuffs. Like that one specifically extends the duration of a stagger. So trying to make sure that you've got enough ATB so that you pop the stagger, immediately hit Synchro Rush to give yourself extra time. There's another one that gives them unlimited MP for a limited amount of time. So then you're trying to like grind AP as fast as possible and just start dumping magic on magic vulnerable enemies. And everybody handles really distinctly and complements each other really well. The fights are thrilling to me, just toggling between characters and exploiting different things with different people's abilities. Like it is a very cool sort of not rock, paper, scissors, but like a puzzle of how can I maximize all of these people I have in my party right now that keeps me thinking beyond just mashing and makes me strategize and think about like party comp and stuff like that. It's great. I'm really liking it. I'm really, really liking it so far. I don't have anything negative to say other than if I never see Chadley again, it will be too soon. Like every single overworld thing involves that fucking android. And he's built himself another android AI, and they both talk to you and they have conversations. I'm like, this is too much Chadley. No more Chadley. That's the only thing I have to say that's not glowingly positive. So Fantasy Critic, Steve, we've got you here. So I know that you have mentioned, and EJ went and listened to some episodes of other podcasts where you had come on and talked about Fantasy Critic. So I want to try to avoid a lot of the sort of like cursory stuff that you probably answer a lot. And the one thing I think that would behoove us for the uninitiated, what is Fantasy Critic and what was its inception for you?
I had the idea from Fantasy Critic from playing fantasy football with my coworkers I had the idea for Fantasy Critic in 2017 because I was really into fantasy football, and I asked my non-work friends if they would want to play fantasy football, and they said, we don't watch football, so not really. So I try to think of, well, is there something else that we could do that's like fantasy football? How would I do some sort of fantasy games thing? Well, review scores. We could do like a fantasy review scores thing. And we did it as a Google Doc in 2018. And somewhere through 2018, I decided this is a good enough idea that I should actually make a website for this. And so I spent a bunch of time programming it. I am a software developer. That is my profession. So, I had a leg up in that regard. But launched the site late 2018 for the 2019 season. So that was that's 5 years. Yeah, 5 years ago. 2024 is the 6th year of Fantasy Critic. Yeah, so we the rest is history, I suppose we could say.
I guess it makes sense that it's 6 years. I mean, that's a solid amount of time, but that it would be more recent than I maybe thought it was, because OpenCritic itself is like 2017 onward, right? Or like late
2014, I believe. I think that their rule for OpenCritic games was there's no OpenCritic page for any games from the PS3, 360 Wii generation and earlier. Like, they started with PS4, Xbox One games. I don't know how they handle 2012 Wii U games.
Oh, right.
Oh yeah, we've sung many swan songs for that ill-fated console. That's cool that we've been, for the 6 years that we've been writing with this. So like I said, we got some real like spreadsheet heads here. Famously, Nick is the spreadsheet guy. He's got data on data. Lots of really interesting questions that they've kind of come up with. And I think a good place to kind of start, Nick, this was one of yours, is how do you go about in maybe curating is the word, features on the website, the functions of the website, to balance sort of like your intent as the developer with the way that people are using it in ways that you maybe didn't expect or intend for it to be used?
Do we have a specific? I think I know what you're getting at.
What I was thinking was, I know that we did a negative points league, and I know that that is a thing that other people have done. And when you make a system that allows you to like bend the rules and like go about things any way you want to, that can sort of impact the way everyone else gets the data fed to them. So, for example, I can see that a game has been drafted in 10% of the leagues that it's available in, but that doesn't tell me that those are all leagues that are trying to go for the most points.
So in theory, it should, because, and maybe I should be more like diligent at checking to make sure people are using this right. But the site tells you that if you are doing some sort of highly custom league, like a negative points league, for example, you're supposed to set a flag on your league that marks it as a custom rules league. That's an option. And then your league doesn't contribute to the site stats. Okay,
that's interesting. I don't know if that was shown. I don't remember that from when we only did that one time. We did that last year.
We used it. Yeah, it was. I didn't mention it because I didn't figure it bore mentioning. But yeah, there's a little click box so that our drafting of things like Blood Bowl 3 or the Lord of the Rings Gollum didn't show up in the data for normal.
We're not messing up Steve's stats.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Sort of tied into that, I was just thinking about how there's now 4 different categories for different levels of remakes and remasters, and how those are always often the most contentious sort of categorizations for tagging, to the point where you actually have a dedicated channel in your Discord server dedicated to people arguing about whether something should be a remaster or a reimagining or whatever that is. So what led you to those particular categorizations, and is there any regret in having there be so many?
No, actually. So I like the way the system is now. And the original reason for it, if we think back to making this game for the 2018 season, which would be the Google Doc season before the website, the game that made me decide like we're going to need to have something to handle this was Shadow of the Colossus 2018. Because to all of my friends at the time who were doing that draft, we said that game shouldn't be allowed. So I had to, I baked in the idea of what games is your league going to allow from the beginning. What you said you've been playing for 4 years. So was 2021 your first season?
Yes.
Okay, so you never played in the pre-tags era, but you know how the Elden games have different tags now? Before 2021, every game had a number that was its remake level, where 0 was not a remake at all, and 5 was a port. Now, the number was behind the scenes, but it went in order. New game, reimagining, remake, partial remake, remaster, port. Those all now have tags instead.
Right.
But then there were separate just checkbox flags for, is this game free to play? Is this game early access? Is this game down the line?
Yearly installment.
Yearly installment is another good example, yes. The tag system is so much a cleaner way, but even the tag system has changed. It was actually 2021 we got rid of partial remake because we thought that it would decrease the amount of debate over what a game should be, because the line between partial remake and remaster and partial remake and remake is too fine to draw. And in my experience, 2021 was the most contentious year of debating things, and adding partial remake back actually made it a lot easier, because what partial remake ends up as is we can't decide. There is not consensus on this game. Like a partial remake game is a game that there are people arguing it should be it's a remaster, and there are people arguing it should be a remake. It's kind of, I call it the morass.
Yeah, we've had a lot of those similar arguments and discussions about what should be allowed in a year, to the point where this year was just nothing is allowed except for one. Everyone gets one. So that's been, I think, pretty beneficial to us.
Our mantra in our league the last couple of years has been more interaction, the better. And, the more often we're engaged, so that, it means more pickups through the year. Now we implemented the trade system this year, but we had this dilemma at the beginning of the year because some of us thought remake should be allowed. Some thought we should, we ended up compromising, like Nick said, on doing just a single remake slot. But at the end of the day, the sort of ethos behind that was like, it's not fun for us to argue about what is what and what should be allowed. And, obviously it's pretty nebulous on your end as far as what is what. Like, well, do we want to allow remakes, but we want to allow partials, or do we want to allow remakes and partials, but not ports? And we just said, just ban it all. Just ban it all. It also, I think, helps us, instead of saying, oh, Resident Evil 4 is obviously going to be a good remake, right? We're giving our attention to newer games and looking forward instead of backwards, right?
Do you ban reimagining too?
Re-everything.
Okay.
This year was banned. Last year, I don't think we had
Just
it
ports
banned.
were banned last year.
The site actually literally begs you not to allow ports. Like, if you try to enable ports, you could try it. The site will literally say, please, please, please don't do this.
Which I totally understand and agree with, because a lot of times OpenCritic will lump in port scores to the same page. So you're literally not even betting on a game getting a score even. You're just betting on the game's score already.
Well, that leads to some interesting situations too, though, right? Like, I know last year, and we ended up making some decisions for ourselves how we were going to handle this, but with Mortal Kombat, that the Switch scores were so terrible that it got its own page, and we all decided for ourselves, we did not love that. And so Nick agreed it didn't make a difference in the final standings, that he would take those scores, add them to the top critic average for the normal page, and average that, because we were kind of like, that's a really interesting precedent that we hadn't seen before.
I'm pretty sure we had a discussion internally on our Fantasy Critic Discord about how we were going to handle that. And I, as far as I remember, I don't remember doing anything special. So we just kind of accepted the OpenCritic decision, which is going to be our default in general.
EJ actually he tweeted about it, and OpenCritic did reply that apparently it was someone, because of their Fantasy Critic League, complaining to OpenCritic that the people behind OpenCritic actually split those pages apart.
That doesn't surprise me. I'm sure that they, they probably have mixed feelings about Fantasy Critic in general, about, like drives attention to OpenCritic, good, gets more hate from it's sent their way bad.
Yeah, people complaining.
How much?
It's just it's so funny to me, just like looking at that and going, yep, that's totally what people would do.
Yeah.
It's like this weird negative or positive, I don't know. It's a feedback loop where the things are affecting each other in strange ways.
I think it's very fair to say that those reviews should count, because they released that game on that platform. They released a product that was awful. They charge for that. It's not a different thing. I don't think the game's box said like warning. If you have any other way to play this game, don't buy this one. Like,
right.
They just put it out.
It wasn't like a FIFA where they actually have a dedicated name for the Switch version because it is a different product. That is the game. It wasn't a port 6 months later even. It was the exact same game, but it was just because people complained about it online that they switched it out, which is so strange because OpenCritic, I don't think they, at least on the surface, they don't separate games by their platform. Like it is the game is the game is the game. Unless
there is extenuating circumstances, and sometimes it's not nearly as controversial as this, but the two Doom releases, like Doom and Doom Eternal, I'm pretty sure are dedicated OpenCritic pages, probably because they just came out so much later on Switch. But those are actually great counterexamples to the Mortal Kombat situation, because I know it takes a lot of work to get your game that wasn't developed for the Switch to run well on the Switch, but those two games prove that it can be done. And clearly the Switch has the install base to make it happen, to make it profitable, if you're willing to put in that time. They weren't.
It just becomes kind of interesting from as a user of OpenCritic, most of the time, if I look up a game, it is going to be every review for that game and not just for specific platforms. Like that's the main differentiator for me from Metacritic.
Yeah.
It's that and the invisible weighting that Metacritic applies to different reviewers. So it's weird when there are those outliers.
I prefer the OpenCritic way of doing things in the majority of cases, because most of the time there aren't version differences that much. I mean, PS4 generation and onward, these consoles and PC are not that different from each other. They're fairly easy, certainly way easier than it used to be to develop a multi-platform game. And whether that's a tooling thing, whereas if you're using Unity or Unreal 4, it'll handle a lot of the complexities for you. I'm not a game developer, but I am a developer. I'm not saying it's trivial to make a multi-platform game, but it's definitely easier than it was in the 360 era and earlier.
As far as the Mortal Kombat thing goes, I think we sort of decided when someone drafts the game, the calculus that they're doing includes the Switch port, right? So we defaulted to, we're going to include those scores regardless of what OpenCritic does. But this sort of brings me to, two questions. One was sort of born out of a conversation that was had in the new feature development tab on your Discord.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something minor I had asked about showing scores at the top table, like for games that hadn't released but had scores already,
Yeah.
You had responded saying, you don't want to drive away traffic from OpenCritic. And this sort of opened up a can of worms that I hadn't considered when I first initiated this topic. And someone had brought up how, I don't want to say restrictive, but OpenCritic's API and that agreement, and I know that's changed since you started the site, but I'm just curious, like, A, how do you balance sort of the quality of life upgrades for the site, but then there's sort of the dance with how you're allowed to use OpenCritic's API and how you're able to bend that? And are there any features you want to implement that you've had to either alter, or are there things that you'd like to implement that maybe you're prevented by their terms of service?
OpenCritic API was free for a while, but I do pay for it now. Fantasy Critic pays for it, so the Patreon dollars, some portion of that goes to OpenCritic. Most of it goes to Amazon, but some of it goes to OpenCritic. But yes, I do. The specific thing you're talking about is on the games page, I don't list the critic scores. On the master games page, which just lists all the games for the year, because I want people to go to if you want to see the top scoring games of the year, I want you to go to OpenCritic. Like, I'll give you the link to OpenCritic, but I don't want to just give you that in a way that lets you skip the step of going to OpenCritic. I can't find the OpenCritic terms of use anymore. The one that I read when I first started this, I can't find it linked anymore. That's from their, like, the way they used to do their API before it went to paid. But I'm still more or less abiding by what the original terms were. And one of the big ones was, don't build a competing product. Don't use our data to make a site that replaces OpenCritic. And I remember in our initial emails that was a concern of theirs, but they ultimately, and I was emailing them in 2018, and they ultimately said, go ahead and go forward. It sounds fine what you're doing. We're just a little worried that it's a competing product. They actually have backed off on the area where it is the most competing. Can't find it anymore. They used to have a feature where you could predict a review score, and you would get like, these are how close I came over the course of the year. And maybe I just don't see it, but I think they got rid of that feature, actually.
That sounds familiar. I think they did that like 3 or 4 years ago. Maybe there just wasn't the level of engagement that it wasn't worth it for them anymore.
Potentially. And the other one, I guess, when I first developed the projected points algorithm, the original reason that I did the projected points algorithm at all, because the hype factor has always been a part of the site. And hype factor is a fairly simple calculation. It is I used to know the actual formula, like I could call it to mind, but it's the average draft position multiplied by the percent of leagues that have taken this game. So both how highly it's drafted and how often it's drafted factor into hype factor. The projected points algorithm is more complicated. That uses linear regression. And by uses linear regression, I mean it calls a Python library that does linear regression, which is I don't know how to actually do that math myself. But it just feeds in a bunch of stats. It feeds in the hype factor. It feeds in the percentage published. Perhaps most importantly, it feeds in the percent counterpicked. And what it's doing is it's looking at games that have come out previously where it has all those stats and also has the critic score, and then looking at ones where it has all those stats but doesn't have the critic score and trying to predict what that critic score is. It's kind of like if you just had a bunch of points on a graph. It's trying to find the line of best fit. It's trying to say, based on if you have these stats, your most likely critic score is this. And it is definitely not perfect, but the goal is for it to be an equal chance of being way too high or way too low. It should, on average, be right. Like, if it says the game's going to get 10 points, it should have an equal chance of getting a 75 or an 85. If it thinks it's going to get an 80, it shouldn't always be estimating low. It shouldn't always be estimating high.
That's fascinating. That's something that we had wondered about a lot, that we kind of, that's very whose line is it anyway for us, because we all have, they have spreadsheets, I don't have spreadsheets, but they're all looking at like their own projections for things based on all of their own research and trying to set those. And then we look at the projected and are like, I wonder how that's calculated. And now we know. That's super interesting. So do you think then the more, as we go from, year 6 of Fantasy Critic to like year 12, that with that many more years worth of a sample size of the intersection of all those numbers, that is going to continue to get like closer and closer to what we may see from that score?
I don't think it can ever be like literally perfect. But I also don't have the numbers to prove this, but I do feel like it has gotten more accurate over time. Some of that is because I have fixed bugs in it. The early days of projected scores had like just literal software bugs. Like, clearly that's wrong. That's going to skew all the numbers. So those have long since been fixed. And now, yes, more data is going to help. The reason I brought this up in general, we were talking about OpenCritic and how their terms of service of their API, terms of use of their API. One of the things that was in there originally was don't do cross-game calculations. Like, they specifically didn't want people doing things like, what is this developer's average score? What is this publisher's average score? What is this franchise's average score? Because if basically they said, we can do that, but we don't want you doing that for us. That's an us thing, which is why when I first developed this feature, I emailed them about it. It's like, hey, this is what I'm planning. Is this okay? And they said, yes, go ahead and do that. I appreciate you reaching out, but that's fine. Which is why, for example, though, I have never included, is one of the reasons why I've never included, the developer into the projected points or the release date into the projected points. It's very intentionally just the stats from the users, not facts about the game.
That is fascinating. Why do you think that they didn't want anybody else doing that using data that was coming from them? I mean, I have my own thought on the matter, which is that they don't want to piss off a lot of the people who are potentially going to support the site or turn off any developers. And they're like, hey, we don't want our games on here. Like, stop aggregating the scores. Or I would think it would be to keep them happy, but I don't know.
So it's worth noting that that language was in that terms of use that I can't find anymore. So I don't know if they have just dropped that requirement altogether. But their original reasoning was they wanted to be able to sell that data to publishers themselves. And I don't know if they ever actually did it, but they wanted to reserve that right to be able to say, to provide a service to publishers to so they could gauge how their games are doing. Of course, the publisher could do it themselves, but they say actually and now I'm quoting something that's no longer in effect, or at least I don't know if it's in effect anymore. But they said, we don't even want you doing it even if you don't publish it. Like, don't do a cross-game score at all. I don't care if you don't make it public, just don't do it. Which obviously is extremely difficult to enforce.
Right.
But they wanted to reserve the right for them to do that sort of thing themselves, was the original goal.
Which I think OpenCritic is fairly ad driven. Like I think probably most of their money is based on ads.
There's also a Patreon.
There's a Patreon, yes. I don't know. I haven't looked at to see how much they're making from that, but I would just assume if they're running ads that the ads are making them money, and it's not just like the pop-up, or not pop-up, but like diegetic, like in the corner ads, but it's also they have links to sales, and like they have a blog and they do things that way too. So I wonder if it's just like a way to interface with advertisers as well. Like they keep that as their proprietary sort of calculations based on their scrapes and the people that they have submit their scores to be aggregated.
I have a number for you. $301 per month, their Patreon.
Okay, so that's like not even a server.
So OpenCritic, I have to imagine OpenCritic gets more traffic than Fantasy Critic, but Fantasy Critic's Amazon bills are not quite $300 a month, but we do literally only have one server.
Mm-hmm.
Not included in those Patreon numbers are their API cost, or their what they charge for the API. That's through Rapid API.
Sure.
This is like their API costs are public. The only tier that allows for commercial use is the $50 tier. So Fantasy Critic pays OpenCritic $50 a month for API use, which I think is more than fair. I'm happy to do.
Sure.
Totally.
Let me take this opportunity, if you don't mind, to plug patreon.com/fantasycritic, of which I am a patron, because I wanted my little ramen emoji right next to my team name there. But also, we talk about this site so much, and it's a constant source of both joy and aggravation for us and our friend group and our little, we have just 5 of us playing. But anyway, I mean, you guys have had a pretty substantial growth over the last 2 years. And I don't know if you have numbers, but in no small part, I imagine you were on Easy Allies and some of the bigger names in the industry who talk about games, Kind of Funny, for example.
And Giant Bomb this year too.
Yes, yeah, that's another one. Seeing Jeff Grubb draft Metroid Prime 4. I was waiting for the
Confirmed.
Not only the tweets, but the news articles saying industry leaker believes Metroid Prime 4 is coming out this year, and the body of it would be he drafted on his fantasy team. But that didn't come to pass. But yeah, those things are obviously very helpful for Fantasy Critic.
I believe you mentioned, this is a one-man operation, right? So
I don't want to take entire credit, because there are 2 people I want to call out that are important parts of this puzzle. I am the original developer and the primary developer, but there's someone who goes by the name of RardyK64, who is the primary developer of the Discord bot. He wrote a Discord bot that was unofficial. It used the Fantasy Critic API and did the Discord messages part, but it ran separately. We talked about that a bunch. I helped him with his bot a little bit, and we ultimately decided to just integrate the bot entirely into the site, which meant rewriting it in C# because the Fantasy Critic is written in C#. So the bot is no longer a separate program. It's part of the site. It's
Sure.
why notifications and stuff are effectively instant, because there's not like a queuing and polling system. It's just something happens, it sends out the message as soon as it happens. So RardyK60, and he's also gotten involved in some other parts of the programming too. He's been a great partner. So that's RardyK64. And the other person I should call out is someone who in our Discord goes by the name of Todd Coward. He's a big part of keeping the games list accurate. There's a lot of games on the games list, and balancing, like getting release dates right and tags right, and release dates is probably the biggest one. But keeping all that up to date is a lot of work, and he and I both split responsibilities on that. And it should be noted that those two are both volunteer, so I'm very grateful for what they do.
How has the growth over the last couple of years impacted both the development of the site, as far as, I mean, I can only imagine costs have gone up, server load, obviously with so many more users, but also for you guys doing all of this stuff manually, you know, as I'm sure sometimes a mediator regarding like the way people are applying rules and tags of games. And I know you've got the channel on the Discord where people discuss it, but I can only imagine you guys have people in your DMs or tweeting at you, or, you know, whether in the Discord or otherwise, constantly needing something resolved.
You would think, but after the draft season dies down, like we're pretty firmly out of draft season now. It's not that you can't do it, but most people that are going to play Fantasy Critic for the year have already drafted at this point. It's not that much work to keep the site running. Like, I don't actually get that many questions. I used to get more, but I think part of that is just I've made it easier for some of those questions to get answered by the site itself. The FAQ is pretty in detailed. I used to have a lot more problems with emails not getting delivered, like email verification or forgot password emails not working properly. I think most of those bugs are sorted out at this point. So other than keeping the games list up to date, which is big, and running the bids every Saturday, the site mostly runs itself. And as far as growth, I actually just checked the database real quick. It does feel like the site has grown a bunch in the past 2 years, but the number of leagues across the site has actually held steady since 2022. 2022, 2023, and 2024 all have just about the same amount of leagues per year.
How much of that is word of mouth and people bringing their friends into it, and are the leagues growing in size?
Maybe. That's a good question. I can get that.
Obviously, we're just a 5-man group, but, you know, we started just the 3 of us on the podcast, and then we brought a buddy into it, and we brought another buddy into it, and we did a separate league with a different group of there were 6 of us, 5 of us, a different group.
Yeah, that is definitely the biggest way that the site grows. It's, you know, word of mouth / these big establishments that do a draft once a year. But
Right.
even the leagues have grown, the size of leagues have grown more than the leagues themselves. But even that, 2024 has about 12,000 people in a league. So if you're in 2 leagues, that does count twice, but it should, I suppose. Last year had 11,000. So actually not too much more. And I think really the reason there is that I haven't done advertising in a new space in a long time. Like, if you follow Easy Allies or you follow Kind of Funny, you already know about Fantasy Critic, and if you are interested in playing it, you probably already are playing it. If I wanted Fantasy Critic to grow a bunch, I would need to advertise on some new platforms,
Right.
or some new with some new groups. I've thought for a long time about trying to come at this from the other angle and advertising on some fantasy football podcasts. Try to capture that side of the overlap, because we know that there's plenty of people that are football people who are also games people.
I don't know how big the podcast is, but there is a fantasy everything podcast that they do drafts of just random things.
I'll check that out.
All fantasy, everything. Shout out Ian Carmel, Portland legend. Let's go.
He's a comedian. He had a Netflix special too, I think.
I'm a big fantasy basketball guy. I've been playing fantasy basketball for 13 or 14 years in the same league. And obviously that's one of the reasons why I gravitated towards this so much, being a fan of games and doing this podcast now for 7 years or something. I am so much more engaged with Fantasy Critic than I have ever been in a decade and a half with fantasy basketball, despite watching basketball every night of my life.
That's interesting, actually, because fantasy sports are so much more high engagement as far as you need to be changing your lineups. And so I haven't played fantasy basketball, to be fair, but if you set and forget fantasy football at the start of the season, you're done. Like, you can get lucky and stick with your drafted players throughout the whole year. If you get really lucky, you can totally win doing that and not have to use the waiver wire much. But you still have to change your lineups because players are going to get hurt and they're going to go on bye. You have to be engaged. Fantasy Critic is much more set and forget. Like, you can spend a total of 3 hours on Fantasy Critic over the course of the entire year and be competitive.
That was our experience the first year. I've been going back through the back catalog and listening to some of the earlier episodes after I jumped in, and listening to the 2021 fantasy updates are like hilarious. Like, we were using private bidding back then, and EJ and I were not engaged really. And so Nick was just buying things, but he thought that we were going to be engaged. So he was overspending for games that he could have just gotten for $1 because we were just not using it at all. So that's been our ethos year over year, is how can we drive more engagement? And boy, howdy, like, I think we've landed on a way that our like week over week engagement, like you just said, is like, this is almost like a de facto Fantasy Critic podcast. It's felt like this year. My wife was like, are you guys doing something different this year? Because I just don't remember you. And now she knows. On Thursday, she's like, I'll grab my phone at 7:00. And she's like, she looks over that, she goes, bids. And then on Saturday,
bids just came out.
Yep. And then on Saturday, she's like, what'd you get? So it's become a really regular schedule for us. And we found that drafting less and picking up more was a huge thing for us. That I think we've drafted less games every year. And this year with all 5 of us, we did 6 draft picks and 1 counter at the draft, and that was it. And everybody's picking up 10 games.
6 for only 3 people is low. Yeah.
For 5.
Yeah, for 5.
Oh, 5. Okay, sorry. I didn't know you had other people in your league.
Yeah, we got a couple knuckleheads. Brandon and Brandon. They've been a source of endless entertainment. Maybe they were mentioned in one of the episodes.
Oh, I do. Okay, yeah, I do remember those names actually now from those episodes.
Yeah, EJ, scream Brandon's name, and then it will ring way more bells than it would otherwise.
Yeah, right.
The trade feature also was something that we all fairly lost our minds over early on, and I know that I ended up coming over to the FC Discord to ask some questions because I was like, we're trying to figure out how to navigate this. We thought we had a clear idea of how we wanted to do trades, and we clearly did not. And so sorting that out, and then what we ended up doing of unifying it basically with the public bidding window that you could submit trade requests anytime from after bids processing to Thursday, so that there'll be at least 2 days of a window for people to comment and also to make counter offers. That we were like, screw it. Instead of trying to prevent the inevitable, which is to say a trade becomes public and somebody says, I will make you a better offer, we just said we are going to actively encourage that.
Full public bidding system.
Yeah, basically, once the trade is open. And we have now executed a number of trades it's been really interesting. I don't know if you have any data to track this, but how much is that system implemented? Are there ways that you see it working well, in ways that you see you want to keep like fiddling or fine tuning, or like what is the usage of this sort of like widely across the site?
Trades is a feature that was requested for a long time before I actually eventually implemented it, because before I added the special slots system. Where it's the system where, this slot can be an expansion pack, but otherwise you can't have expansion packs. Up until that point, I didn't really see that much use case for a trade, because you want a trade to be, mutually beneficial. And after that, fantasy football, a classic example is like, I have too many running backs. I need a wide receiver. I'll trade one of my running backs for one of your wide receivers. Once I added special slots, which the positions in fantasy football was definitely the inspiration for it. When she added that, then it justified to me like, okay, I need more new gaming franchises. I will happily trade one of my non-new gaming franchises for a new gaming franchise. But overall, the way I designed the system was to be as flexible as possible and let the leagues decide what is fair. I'm sure you're all aware, the league manager has to approve every trade, and really what it should be is the whole league should approve every trade. So I let you do whatever you want, more or less.
We had to go through the growing pains. For the context, really quick, a player agreed to a trade that was quite bad for him. It was a bad trade. It was a very bad trade. And in hindsight, an even worse trade.
Who proposed that trade? I'm fuzzy.
Listen, I just approached a fellow player and said, hey, I am interested in one of these games prior to it getting a score. And he said, how about X amount? And that amount was $6 for Tekken. And I said, yes, I will do that. And other players in the league took umbrage with that. And so we had to end up retroactively revisiting how the trade system worked. And at the end of the day, we didn't want to give any one person, veto power. At the end of the day, everyone's an adult. They're making their decisions. And so if we just take it to a public bidding window at the same time that your public bidding window is live, they can make counteroffers. That just self-polices in most cases that someone is free to take a better offer. And that just fixes any perceived impropriety. And if, for example, someone said, hey, I'll give you $15 for Tekken, and he still said no, well, clearly there's something fishy going on, and then we can investigate further. But we're all playing to have fun. There's nothing weird going on. That solves itself, I think.
We're also, as you know, you're a fantasy football guy yourself. All my fantasy football leagues, we have a trade deadline that after a certain point, in order to prevent shady trades to try to boost someone, we have decided, I think we haven't set a hard and fast one yet, but I believe the conversation was end of Q3. That
Halloween.
When we get to, Halloween. We did say Halloween, so
Halloween.
that it's just the last 2 months. And as we continue going through the year, we may decide we want to lock that down sooner. But having a trade deadline so that we have no shady business going on, so that we don't put Nick in a position where he has to make a unilateral action. Because in a smaller league, too, we were like, there's 5 of us. 2 of the 5 are involved with the trade. And if the league manager is not one of those 5, then that's one of a very limited number of votes to make that decision. And it's a lot easier for it to be, well, this trade is bad for me, so I'm going to say no, and I have an outsized ability to knock it down in a way that like an 18-person league just doesn't.
There is definitely such a thing as, veto collusion, where this trade is a reasonable trade, is made in good faith. These 2 players both at least believe that they are better off with the trade, but player C believes that they're worse off with the trade, so they say veto. That, I'm pretty sure that's the sort of thing that's next to impossible to program, to not allow the site to let you do it. But in text, the site says that's not fair. If the trade is made in good faith, both parties truly believe that they are better off with this trade, it should be allowed.
Trades are off by default. I haven't checked to see what the default settings are across the board, but how do you decide what the defaults are, and has that philosophy changed at all? I know just recently you implemented the early access. Getting a score can count. That is an option that leagues can opt into.
For a long time, a game had to be released, and released is an increasingly hard thing to define in some cases. And it's not always even early access. Sometimes it's just the game that wants to play fast and loose with what day it comes out, like Call of Duty. Sometimes. But yeah, you had to have a confirmed and happened release date to get points. But now, yes, there is an option to say as soon as the game gets a score, you can get points for it, which does help with early access games. But even still, most, not all, but most early access games don't get reviewed until they call themselves 1.0.
And that's tough with service games as well, free-to-play games. I'm just naming a lot of the tags that are usually by default, I think, are encouraged or disabled from the get-go. And I would imagine most of the leagues that are made are playing by default rules. I don't know what the stats are on that. That seems like a lot to try and query the database for that. But
right now, I probably couldn't pull that up super quick. But I will say that I get a lot less requests and questions about ports than I used to, so I think people have finally listened and aren't allowing ports anymore. But yeah, definitely people still allow early access because that comes up all the time.
Which it makes sense. People want the big pop for drafting Baldur's Gate 3. They want the big pop for Hades.
The thing is that it's not a great fit for Fantasy Critic in general because, and I recognize that demos play a role in this too, but it's not really betting when you're betting on a game that you've already
right.
Something that I've had an idea to do for a long time, but I haven't figured out exactly how to do it, and it would be an option. But some sort of multiplier system where when a game finally comes out, you get more points based on how long have you had it. If you've had a game all year and then it comes out, you get more points than if you picked it up a week before it comes out. I think that that's playing that way where you have to make a prediction farther out. That to me is the real spirit of Fantasy Critic, not picking up a game that it's coming out next week. I got to grab it now.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. That's like a total Hail Mary kind of approach. Could reward people playing fast and loose, like being real risky. So something like that would be an awesome option.
I want it. I'm a gambler. I want it.
Yeah, I just have to figure out what's the actual math of that.
Right, the scaling and all that.
We had kind of played along with that last year, played with the idea of an unannounced game. Obviously, not to the degree of scaling your points, but rewarding people for being particularly prescient and taking that Hail Mary. And it really paid off for Nick, who drafted unannounced Metroid Prime Remake. And that paid off really well. But those are fun little wrinkles. And every year we've played with some of those rules. And last year we had 3 leagues that had different criteria just so we could kind of experiment and try to focus in what we want to do with the podcast league as we bring in more people into doing it. Before I forget, it's sort of an aside, but you're doing the, Chris had mentioned the Counterpick League. Are you still doing the 2018 league with your buddies?
Oh yeah, it's public on this. It's a public league on the site. Like, not that other people can join it, but you can see it. It's called the Original Memers. I think it's fun that it's the only league on the site that you can go in the drop down and click on 2018. It's there. It's worth noting, like I said, that we didn't do that draft with the site. We did that draft as a Google Doc, but as I developed the site, I put the games that we picked in the right order in the database. Also, fun behind the scenes thing is that when I originally envisioned this, it was Fantasy Metacritic, not Fantasy OpenCritic. So 2018, our official winner was decided based on Metacritic scores, whereas the site is based on OpenCritic scores. Luckily, it is the same winner.
I was just about to ask.
Really close, though. By Metacritic terms, my friend that won by like 10 points or something like that, but by OpenCritic terms, he won by like 2 points.
I'm seeing here, Mr. Consistency, Player Elite Fusion. Your league slogan is consistently second or third place. My league slogan is second only to the best. So I like that. I feel, again, I'm feeling
kinship
here. Yeah.
Most of my league mates that have won are much more boom or bust. They'll go from first to fourth and fourth to first, whereas I'm second place, third place.
We had a little bit of drama last year where I took third place to Chris by 200th of a point, thanks to a New Year's Eve sports story review.
Yeah.
22.
I was like, you must have had a lot of these. In fact, if I remember correctly, there was like a specific thing on the homepage that was like, I know Sports Story, I know.
Sports Story literally broke the site in 2022, and it happened again this year. But Sports Story 2023 drafts opened. People drafted Sports Story for 2023, like in late December after the Game Awards. And then Sports Story came out in 2022. So then once the calendar rolled around to 2023, the site basically said it's impossible for someone to have a game in 2023 that came out before the year started and yet people do, and that crashed the site. So that's obviously an oversight in the code that I thought I fixed, and then happened again. I don't remember what game it happened with this year, but it happened again. Hopefully I fixed it for real this time.
Fantasy Critic is a side project, a passion project, a side endeavor. When those sort of things happen and you're at work or something and you get the notification like, uh-oh, all hell is broken loose with the site. I mean, how do you balance doing this as a hobby, which is really turning into a job is what it sounds like from just how involved it is on the back end? How do you balance that? And is there a point in the future where you see this becoming a full-time endeavor? And if so, given the time and the resources, how do you see that evolving the site?
The catastrophe, yeah, sometimes there are, the site's crashed and I'm at work, and the answer honestly is gotta live with it. I would like at some point to add some better redundancy to the site, but the thing is that generally speaking, that just costs more money. For something that's only needed once or twice a year, to spend extra money on backup server, even if the backup servers are automated, so they only come up when they're needed, things like that. I'm sure that I can do better, but I'm limited as far as how much better I can do without incurring additional monthly costs.
Sure.
But it is something I want to at least try to do better at. Part of the thing that, gives me some comfort as far as when the site's down, this is not a life or death thing. Like, if the site's down for a few hours, so be it. It's unfortunate. It gets to me a bit more now that people do pay for the site. But in the it was one of the things I was hesitant about making the Patreon for a long time, because when the site was totally free, it's like, all right, the site's down for 5 hours. Like, I wish it weren't, but also the site's free, so what do you want from me?
Right.
Now people are paying, so I do believe I have some obligation to keep the site working. It's generally pretty rare that the site fully goes down anymore. It's usually on a day of a Nintendo Direct.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So yeah, I'm going to continue to work on the site's resiliency. As far as a time in the future where I might be able to work on this full time, I'm not sure. There is a time in the past where I was able to work on this full time. In 2022, I set aside some time to focus on Fantasy Critic full time. That's when I started the Patreon. That's when I added features like trades and special game slots, things like that. But the truth is that the Patreon money's nice, and it does cover the server costs. Like, Fantasy Critic is not a loss for me personally anymore, but it's
awesome.
Not paying the bills. Like, it's
Sure.
I still need full-time employment. It's not something that's going to pay the rent.
Do you advertise on the sites? Do you run ads?
I don't run ads on the site. I've always considered running ads on the site, but I don't think it would really make that much money. So many people use ad blockers, and you're basically... I don't think that ads are the best monetization model for more than one reason. I know that they work. I know it's what a lot of the internet runs on. But I think that the fairest model for monetizing a product is to be paid by the people that want to use your product. So Patreon's I think the right thing for Fantasy Critic. I'm not ruling out ever adding ads, but I think the way it would end up is the people that don't run ad block are having a worse site experience, and the people that do run ad block are having the same site experience that they always were. And so I'm making the site worse for the people that care to give money to the site, and the other people are subsidized by them effectively.
I got into a brief back and forth with Per Schneider at IGN. I was on their site. I think I was looking at a game guide or something, and I just had a horrible time with some of the way they implement their ads and the pop-ups and some ads that don't ever leave your screen and some that pop up right over the text and you're like mid-paragraph and something pops up at you. And I thought there has to be a better way to do this, because everyone runs ad block, but I pause it on a lot of the sites that I use frequently and want to support. And I just, exactly like you said, this is not a great experience for me. And I had tweeted at him and he responded, was gracious about it. And, acknowledge some of the shortcomings, but thinking about it through that lens of like, we're making it worse for the people who are engaging with this site.
I think that monetizing internet content is one of the unsolved problems of our day.
The ads are either completely unnoticeable, in which case they're ineffective and probably wouldn't last long, or they are so in your face that they're ruining your experience and people are going to block them. What is the happy middle ground? Like you said, it's the wild, wild west.
I mean, there are ways that I could try to make more money with Fantasy Critic, like running ads or charging for just basic use. But I think it has a very high chance of backfiring. People don't pay for fantasy football. Can I really expect them to pay for Fantasy Critic? Not to mention the fact that the site is open source. And I, from the get-go, have said, if someone believes that they can do better and they want to take the site's code and run a competitor, they're within their rights to do that. So I think if I did start doing a whole bunch of stuff like that, we would see a Fantasy Critic competitor pop up. I think, honestly, if I'm being honest about it, where's Fantasy Critic the most monetized? It's that it has increased my programming skills. Like, I've learned a lot through doing it, and having done Fantasy Critic looks good for me when I'm looking for jobs. Is truthfully the true monetary value of Fantasy Critic is opportunities elsewhere in my life because of Fantasy Critic.
Oh yeah, leverage that. That's awesome. I wanted to ask, since you talked about it's kind of in a stable place right now. You're not putting out fires. You're not actively developing new features that I know of. But for the future, now that you're at this place of not stagnation, but you're stable, everything is going okay. The growth hasn't exploded, but it is growing. There's a steady growth. What do you want to do with Fantasy Critic now? What do you want to expand on? I know we were just talking about Open Critic and how they used to have that guessing game. Is that something you would want to implement on Fantasy Critic, like another side thing? Because I do think that the Critic Royale is really cool. I've only participated in one of them, but that's another fun side activity that people like to do other things when they're not actively waiting for bids to drop on Thursday or process on Saturday.
I have definitely thought for a long time about how to increase, how to get people coming back to the site more frequently. And the idea of adding a predict a score to each game is interesting, where it would be its own mode entirely, separate from Critics Royale, separate from actual leagues. That would probably be the way I would do it. But here's one of my fears about it. One of the goals of Fantasy Critic from the beginning was to provide a structure and a way for your friends to talk about video games more, to talk about what games are coming out and how you think they're going to do. And part of the thing about the draft is that once you do the draft, the cards are on the table. Sure, the bids are out there, but you're free to discuss those games and how you all think they're going to do. If I add on this feature of predicting a game score, and particularly if predicting a game score correctly gave you bonus points in your leagues, if it was integrated in that way, that disincentivizes people from talking about how good they think a game is going to be, because that then still remains a secret and a competitive advantage until the game comes out.
We have encountered that. I felt that really keenly this year once we started introducing trades, because absent trades, like you said, I've got the game. I can discuss freely what I think the value of a game I have is versus a game that you have. But once we get into like a trade economy, and yes, you want trades to be equal, but you want to win. Like, you want to come out on top of that trade, which means that you inherently have some kind of angle that you think you're getting greater value. I literally texted EJ at one point, was like, I'm sad because I don't feel like we can talk about these games in the same way that we have previously.
And that I feel like if you get in that spot, that's a reason to change the rules. I think that to me, if I was feeling that in my leagues, I would get rid of trades. Trades is actually not something, I think I allow it in the leagues I run, but I don't know if we've ever done it. I don't know if we've ever actually had a trade.
We've had 3 trades so far, and if you wanna, if you wanted to do like a roast me Reddit segment where we're like, I'll give you player A and player B, and you tell me who you think came out on top, that could be fun.
Sure.
But we've oh boy, okay.
Well, if there are these for this year, because in the past we can see who came out on top.
No, these are for this year. These are for this year. All right, so we've had 3 trades that have gone through this year. Here they are. Trade number 1: player A received Earthblade and $3 of budget. Player B received Visions of Mana and Final Fantasy XVI: The Rising Tide.
Final Fantasy XVI expansion is going to come out this year. Didn't we just recently learn more about Earthblade being more likely to come out this year?
I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything
is
from that
Earthblade
developer.
the
Celeste devs.
It is the Celeste devs, yeah. Site says 2024.
I'm still not confident Earthblade is. I think that might be a 2026 game, to be honest with you.
It was said to be 2023 in 2021, and then they changed it to 24.
Well, it was Visions of Mana and what?
Mana and Final Fantasy for Earthblade and $3.
I'd rather be Visions of Mana, person who ended up with Visions of Mana and Final Fantasy 16 expansion.
That seems to be the consensus. And the context, of course, the context for this is that the player who traded for Earthblade was getting off of a counter pick after some other poor draft selections, like Hades 2, for example, which got counterpicked immediately. So that's just a dead slot right off the board.
Yeah, Visions was a counterpicked game, so that was part of the calculus for player B. Cool. Second trade. This is a really straightforward. Avowed for $6.
I'd rather have Avowed than $6.
Interesting.
If Avowed was available, I would bid $6 on it. I would bid $7 on it. So yeah, I'd rather have Avowed. I think it will. I think it has. Maybe call it maybe a 55% chance of coming out, but I think it has 87 potential. Yeah, I'd rather have Avowed than $6.
When Obsidian hits it, they hit.
The third one, which was this week, is player A received Homeworld 3. Player B received Rise of the Golden Idol and $5.
That one's probably the toughest one to judge.
I agree.
I drafted Homeworld. I took Homeworld 3 in a couple leagues. And then there was something that somebody posted in the Fantasy Critic Discord a couple weeks ago that there was at least one person that played Homeworld 3 and was like, on their YouTube channel, was like, oh, this game is not looking great, not feeling great. So maybe I'm a little bit more skeptical on Homeworld 3. I'd probably rather be the Homeworld 3 person still. If there's anything I've learned from playing Fantasy Critic, it's that games are less likely to come out than you think they are. There are so many games that say 2024 that are not going to come out this year.
Oh, for
and
sure.
We don't know which ones now aren't going to come out, but I think when I first started playing, I would have said, yeah, if a game says it's coming out in 2018, there's probably at least like a 70% chance it's going to. I think it's closer to 40% chance it's going to.
Those dates don't exist for us, the consumer. They exist for shareholders as they're keeping suits happy, and that could get pushed for 5 years.
Indie games are the trickiest because they aren't accountable to shareholders. I suspect that if Team Cherry had a major publisher behind them, that Silksong would have come out a few years ago. And maybe it shouldn't. Maybe a few years ago it was a mess, and we're going to get the best possible version of Silksong. Or maybe they're in a situation where they have feature creeped like infinitely, and they kind of needed a guiding hand. I don't know.
I'm sure we'll find out in 2025, right?
Yeah, Silksong's been passed around to somebody different every year, it feels like. Or did you have it twice, Nick?
I had it twice. I had it in 2021 and I had it in 2023.
And I think I had it in 2022.
Yeah.
No, Bren has it. Yeah.
Now Bren's got it. Yeah. And it was
That's
drafted
the albatross that
every year. It's
we all share.
drafted every year and every year. Now, I mean, it's just, it's a full meme at this point. It's like Duke Nukem Forever territory. We're like, this game's maybe never going to come out. I don't know.
Yeah, at least it's more likely to come out than a game like Beyond Good and Evil 2, which allegedly is still in development, but that game's never coming out.
Yeah.
Hey,
right.
Skull and Bones came out.
Skull and Bones
So
did
anything
come out,
can
and
happen.
honestly, it's not a game for me. I'm not going to play it. But I think the consensus for a lot of people was, hey, this could have been worse. This is not by no means amazing, but it's not awful.
I'm not one to defend Ubisoft, but Sea of Thieves, another pirate game, reviewed similarly poor, a little bit better. And that game has really come a long way. I love that game. I see the gripes with it. I love how it's come along. I love that it's coming to PlayStation so I can play it again with a different group of people. So it could have been worse, and it might get better.
Yeah, we never know. Future best ongoing at the Game Awards, following in the spirit of Cyberpunk.
Stop it.
Of getting rewarded for becoming a full game, becoming a real boy, Pinocchio style. Steve, are there any questions? You had said that you maybe wanted to ask some stuff about our like league history, activity, things like that. So I want to like hold some space for that before we either switch gears or button it up.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with, how did you hear about Fantasy Critic? Who heard about it first and how?
I introduced it to the boys because I saw the Easy Allies draft from 2020, and I thought that was very entertaining. So then once we've been doing this podcast for a while, me and EJ, and then Chris joined us, and that became the three of us doing the podcast. So then I wasn't going to do a draft with just me and EJ. Like that would be a little bit silly. I don't think a 2-person league would be very fun, but a 3-person league, that could be entertaining. So we tried it out in 2021, definitely learned a lot. I do think, if I had to make a suggestion, I would say that public bidding should be the default, because people, I think, generally will pick defaults. Public bidding made a huge difference for 2022 and increased our engagement with the process week to week.
Checking what are the defaults right now. No, it always does default to secret bidding. There's options, so you can choose between beginner, standard, and advanced, which are just presets. And they change a couple things, but they don't change the bidding system, which is the most significant option on the site for sure. That is the thing that has the most impact of the things that you can choose. Has there been a runaway, like clearly this person wins every year or close to every year, or has it gone back and forth?
I won by a single game year one, I think 3 points in year one, but that we hadn't quite figured out the economy, and the bids were private. Last year, Nick was the runaway winner, and I lost to Chris by 0.02 of a point. That was 2022. And then last year, 2023, it came down to the wire between Nick and I. Less competitive at the bottom, and then Chris was kind of in the middle through the year. But I like to say Nick is the one that keeps us up at night, but it's bounced around a little bit.
Who is Presh till death? I'm looking at your league right now.
That's
okay.
me. Yeah.
All right, yeah. So one of the things I found with Fantasy Critic is that it is less luck-based than fantasy sports, at least fantasy football, which is the only one I've played. There is plenty of examples of, you play fantasy football with your coworkers and one person doesn't watch football and they auto-draft and they win. But that happens in fantasy football because I guess when it really comes down to it, it is easier to predict that a game is going to get delayed than it is to predict that a player is going to get injured, which is like the same idea. Like if your player tears their ACL and they're out for the year, that's kind of the equivalent of a game not coming out. And the game not coming out is the easier one to predict there, generally speaking. I think that there are certainly some players you would say like, ooh, they're an injury risk, and there are games that are a delay risk for sure. But I found that Fantasy Critic is easier to be good at than, or it's less luck driven. It's less luck driven than fantasy sports.
Yeah, having a game come out is the hardest part. Most of the games, with very few exceptions, will get above a 70. So if you have that on your roster, that is much better than the 0 of a will not release.
Yeah.
You got a decade of open critic scores to look at. You could look at industry trends, developer trends, and even delays. It's like you could look at trends and reasonably predict what may or may not come out. I think we did this with the Game Awards last year, where we looked at the average score of games that got announced at the Game Awards. And like that's data we can pull from now, where like you said, you can't predict if a player's going to get hurt. You can't predict to make an NBA analog, Damian Lillard having his worst professional season. Does that have to do with his personal life, the move? Is it just him getting old? The things that you can't necessarily predict. That with video games, there's a lot of data to pull from.
It's just one point of data. It's the score. It's not how many points a player gets in a game on a given day. So it is a lot more, like you said earlier, it's boom or bust. Like big games will push you over the top a lot more than getting a bunch of 78s or 82s.
One of the things that also I've learned through playing this game, playing Fantasy Critic, but also developing Fantasy Critic, is when I first started in 2018, I had predicted that, like, I think the average game that gets chosen is going to get like an 82. I think that that'll be a good barometer. If you're above 82, that was a good pick. If you're below 82, you probably could have done better. And that's just definitely not true. It's definitely the number is actually closer to like 77, which is somewhat of a big difference. But the thing I really noticed is if you're not playing Fantasy Critic, there are so many games that come and go and don't get remembered. Like, as far as indie games go, your Celestes and your Hollow Knights and your Outer Wilds, trying to find the next Celeste is so difficult because there are so many that come and go and don't get reviewed or are just a 65 or a 72. There's just so many games out there that get forgotten.
Sometimes you get lucky and get Balatro for $4.
Yeah, that's the one.
Who the fuck saw that eclipsing 90? I had even had my eye on it, and I was kind of pretty knotted up with some of my slot availability, and I went, I could bid $5 on this. I think it's going to be good, but I don't know if it's going to be like 85 good or like 79 good. And people were like, oh, that's cool. So I didn't bid $5 on it, and it hits at a 95, and I had been watching it, but indies, man. Indies are so hard to predict. Are you getting Balatro or are you getting Pacific Drive?
I counterpicked Balatro in one league.
Ooh.
Not quite as bad. That's a league where every game, full counter league. Yeah, every single game gets counterpicked. But it was like a second round counterpick. But the thing is that that's my own blind spot of like, that game doesn't appeal to me at all. Like, I looked at it, I was like, oh, it's just poker? Okay, yeah, counterpick that one. I don't want to play poker.
It's so funny. We have our discussions when we're drafting and talking about these games, and we try to be like, am I picking this game because I like the genre and I want this game, or am I picking this because I think the reviews are going to be high? And we start off all confident, like, yeah, we can separate ourselves from this pick, and we can go for the thing that's the safe pick. But by round 10 or whatever, like, we are so just in our feelings and are picking the games, the heart picks, the things that we want to come out, the things that we want to be good. It's so funny just to see that degeneracy into our just base lizard brain format.
I've never taken Silk Song, but partially that's just because it gets taken earlier than I would take it. Eventually, in a draft, I would be, okay, I'll take Silk Song now. But the game I have ended up with a bunch of times is Metroid Prime 4. I have that in a bunch of leagues this year.
You're manifesting.
I've got that this year. It's coming, baby. There is nothing on the calendar after June. We just got that Mario Day thing today. Happy Mario Day, by the way, y'all. We just got that.
For those who
celebrate Mario. Don't we all celebrate Mario?
I celebrate.
We do.
Mario and his brother Luigi Mario. It's coming, right? I mean, like, come on. They have nothing on the calendar after July. Paper Mario's coming in 2 months.
They don't even have a Pokemon game this year.
Right.
That never happens.
It's gotta be. Steve, me and you, the power of manifestation.
This is the best I have felt about it since 2019, before January 2019. For whatever that day was in January when it was restarted. But it's been 5 years since it was restarted. Of course, I'm sure you played Metroid Prime Remastered. I'm not sure if the rest of you did.
We did. EJ did not finish it in hilarious fashion because he stopped using save stations. And so when he died on the Omega Pirate, he lost like 30%, 25% overall completion of item collection and stuff. And he just put it down. And I don't blame him.
So that's game ending. Yeah. The fact that came out last year and also was so good, like that actually, I think that Metroid Prime Remastered is the old, maybe Doom Eternal on Switch, I don't know. But as far as games that technically speaking can go toe-to-toe with, let's say, a PS4 game, I think Metroid Prime Remastered is one of the only ones. I think it's technically speaking the best looking game on Switch. So if Metroid Prime 4 just looks as good as Metroid Prime and is still just a base Switch title, I'm fine with it.
And it runs
That'd be big
great
hype.
too. It is smooth. It is buttery smooth at all times.
Will Metroid Prime 4 be Nintendo's second $70 game?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do think so. I actually hope it does. I hope it is.
Yeah, because they're not going to eke out more sales by selling it for 60, so they might as well make it be the premium experience.
Mario Wonder wasn't, right? Mario
Nope,
Wonder
that
was
was
just
60.
60. I wouldn't be shocked that having now that they did it for Tears of the Kingdom, that it's going to be the base price for all Switch 2 games. As soon as they do it, though, third parties are going to follow suit. If they've got, if the Switch 2 launches with 3D Mario for $70, then whatever the big third-party games are also going to be $70.
Yeah, you'll get 2K25 or 26 next year on Switch too. That's, $70.
At some point, we'll get Elden Ring on Switch 2. If it can run on a PS4 and an Xbox One, it should, in time, it'll come to Switch 2.
I would hope that the next Switch will be like comparable to a Steam Deck, and Elden Ring can run on Steam Deck.
It needs to be.
I think we're getting into a whole different topic. But I'm not convinced that it will be able to compete with Steam Deck on raw power. The best thing to hope for as far as the Switch being able to keep up with the Steam Deck is that since it is a dedicated console that developers can target precisely, that you can get better performance out of it. Like, for example, you are definitely better off playing Elden Ring on a PS4, base PS4, than a comparable PC from 2013. Metal Gear Solid 5 runs on the 360. Like, that's...
Right.
That's crazy. We've been talking for over 2 hours now, so we want to be respectful of your time, Steve. It's been quite a while, so...
These critical hits sometimes can get on to like 40 minutes.
If you're happy, I'm happy to do that segment.
Oh, baby. Critical hits. I love hosting critical hits. I like playing critical hits. I love hosting critical hits. This is our game show that Nick started that awards points for guessing some games that have some great scores. The way that this works, each round will proceed snake style. 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1. You'll have the option to select 2 games that fit within a given category, trying to find the highest open critic score that you can. And I say open critic specifically because we typically do Metacritic because it stretches back further. But since we're talking Fantasy Critic, I thought it would be appropriate to look to open critic scores for this. Everything's on the table. If it's on open critic, it is eligible to be selected. The only caveat is that in any given round, you cannot repeat a game from the same franchise. So for example, if EJ were to select Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, then Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy VII Remake, whatever, those would not be eligible in that round specifically, in that category. That way, it's like, give me a game that's an adventure. We don't just get 6 Zelda games. You know what I mean? In the spirit of looking for good titles.
So I think we're talking 2014 and up, maybe 2013 and up if we're talking open critic then.
Yes. Verdicts on acceptability within the category are made immediately. If for whatever reason myself or any of you chums decide that you want to take exception to a specific category, for example, what was the one with Kratos? Like, name it, give me a game where you play as the villain, and EJ was like, God of War, Kratos is a bad guy, and we were like, dude, get the fuck out. If the game is deemed not to fit within the category, you do get a one replacement pick. You get an option to supply a different game. You will have, what did we do last time? You get 2 minutes to make your selection. 1 minute. What did you do last time, Nick? Because that kept us honest. Or EJ, what'd you do?
It was 2 minutes.
We did 2 minutes, but it should be 1 minute. I think 2 minutes is too long.
And no research, right? You got to just think of it.
Correct. Phones away, off the dome. You will need a pencil and paper for later.
Oh, Jesus.
Okay.
Pencil?
I'll have to, let me go grab that right now then.
Yeah, go ahead.
He's making us work for it. Steve's regretting this.
I keep a notebook next to my bed where I write down the programming ideas I have it when I am.
Fully prepared.
It's a smart thing to have.
That's my notes app. The point system. Whoever supplies the highest rated game in a given round receives 4 points. Second highest is 3. Third highest is 2. Fourth highest is 1. 5 and 6 receive nothing. This means that were you to name the top 2 games, you can double dip for 4 plus 3 for a total of 7 for that round. And I've got a scoring spreadsheet that Nick helped me get formatted for the way that I was thinking about stuff today. I will also give 3 bonus points to the first person who can guess the overall theme for this week's installment. After the 3rd and 6th categories, 6 is the final one, I will have a 30-second window for y'all to all shout guesses at me. If I hear it, 3 points to the person who said it first. All right. As you are our guest, you will have the first choice in the first round. EJ, you're picking second. Nick, you're picking third with the back-to-back. Then back to EJ, back to Steve. Give me a game that gets better the more people that play it.
World of Warcraft? We got to be one that's more World of Warcraft Shadowlands.
Oh, jeez.
Wow,
man.
Shadowlands. And EJ, we are right back to you.
All I can think of is a Wii U game that's straddling the line. Okay. Better than more people who play it.
I've got my 2.
Go Diablo 3 or 4. Excuse me.
3 or 4?
Go 4. Go with the newest one because I played that one.
That you did.
Better with friends.
Okay. Nick, to you.
Titanfall 2.
Seems like an acceptable answer, but I can confirm it does not get better with more people. The single player campaign is what makes that game special.
That's funny. That's really funny. Nick, what's your second game?
Among Us.
Ooh.
I don't know how it scored, but people loved that game and it was huge. So
That's a great answer off the dome. EJ, back to you.
Screw it. My first answer was Nintendo Land. I'm just gonna throw that back out.
Yo!
That's for the boys back home right there.
Oh,
throwing for content. Good job, EJ.
I love Nintendo Land.
What, not Metroid Prime Federation Force, EJ? Triforce Heroes?
EJ, I'm going to give you an opportunity to submit a different title.
Yeah, it's not on. That's not going to be on Open Critic.
Yeah, I'm going to be a kind and merciful God this week and just tell you that it doesn't have a score.
So that would have been a launch title. So that would have been November 2012. So just before. Ah,
yeah.
man.
You have I'm going to give you a 45-second extension.
Okay. I'm thinking of all these great multiplayer games that I play, but they would have reviewed horribly. Like Sea of Thieves is what, a 67, a 65, something like that. Animal Crossing New Horizons.
Okay.
That's a good pick.
I had a lot of fun with the boys, trading flowers and visiting your towns, your islands rather.
Steve, your second pick.
Super Smash Bros. Ultimate.
Yo, yes.
Everyone is here.
I think that's like a 92 or something.
What am I supposed to be writing down?
Nothing yet. Nothing yet.
Nothing yet. Okay.
We're gonna play Pictionary. Like, what is this about, Chris? This is new.
You will see. You will see.
All right.
Probably have write down a number for a score and then we'll all reveal. That would be my guess.
Okay. In first place, receiving 4 points with a score of 92, it is Steve with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate.
92. I don't remember
92.
that. That's wild.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's pre-league. So, yeah, amazing game, unimpeachable. Second place with a round 90, receiving 3 points is EJ with Animal Crossing New Horizons. In third place, with a score of 88, receiving 2 points, it is EJ again with Diablo 4. And picking up the 1 in fourth with an 87, it's Nick with Titanfall 2. Among Us and World of Warcraft Shadowlands have matching 80s.
Will you humor me? Will you dip into Metacritic and tell me what Nintendo Land would have got? Wait, did that breach 80?
It's also a pack-in. Those are. Was it a pack-in actually?
It came bundled with the black Wii U console. I think the white didn't have. I think the white didn't have anything.
It had 32 gigs of memory, Chris. Don't you forget.
No. Nintendo Land is a 77.
Perfectly cromulent game. All right.
Underrated.
Yeah, I like Nintendo Land. I haven't played that in a long time.
Yeah, oh my God, that was a staple in my college apartment. All right. Category 2, EJ, you're picking first, followed by Nick, and then Steve with the back-to-back this time. Give me a game that involves seasons. Give me a game that involves seasons. EJ, you are first.
Damn it.
Also, no repeat games.
Oops. No repeat games.
Early. Okay. Shoot. Can you repeat franchises? Do I got to go New Leaf here? Is that cheating?
You are welcome to return to a franchise across categories. Sure.
New Leaf is that pre-Open Critic? Was that?
I don't know.
No. In the interest of not being a cheeky bastard, I'm not going to go Animal Crossing.
I respect it. I respect that.
The game I'm thinking of, I don't think does seasons. Distinct biomes, yes, but I don't think it's seasonal. I think it's just the environment. Ah, shoot, man. Let's go Stardew Valley.
Okay.
That's post-Open Critic. That's post-Open Critic.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Strong pick.
I'm sitting here like, which Harvest Moon knockoff actually did well? None of them.
The one that killed Harvest Moon knockoffs.
Yeah, seriously. Nick, pick to you.
I'm trying to remember which one it is. I'm going to say that it's Forza Horizon 4 was the one that they were marketing heavily because of the different seasons and weather effects. I'm so sorry.
Great minds. Great mind. That's what's that 92? Is that right?
I don't know. Write it down.
Steve, you've got back-to-back picks.
Yeah, the two that I can think of are way older than Open Critic. I'm stretching seasons here, I guess. I'm going to say Apex Legends.
I will allow this. Seasons is intentionally open-ended.
Yeah, Apex Legends.
Damn, that's a good pull, man. That's a good
And
pull.
your second pick?
I'm also going to stretch here, and I'm going to say F1 2022. Formula One seasons. And I'm picking the one that I think's reviewed the best recently. I think it was about 2022.
Okay. Nick, your pick.
I am also going to stretch season just to see if you'll allow it. But Cook Serve Delicious 2?
What?
You're seasoning your meats. There's a lot of seasons that you're using.
That's good. What's that called? Okay. Cook Serve Delicious 2. EJ, your final choice.
I feel like I have to go Animal Crossing now because I can't think of anything else. Okay. In the spirit of Harvest Moon knockoffs, we go Story of Seasons. Was that post Open Critic? That's like a 70-something.
Which one? That's the name of a franchise, man.
No, Story of Seasons, right? That's the 3DS.
I have Story of Seasons on Open
That's a
Critic.
3DS game.
I am logging it. Stand by for tabulation.
I can picture that cartridge in my mind.
I guess there's one that's just called that.
Yeah, maybe when they lost the Harvest Moon rights from Natsume.
All right. Your results. In first place, with a score of 92, it is Nick with Forza Horizon 4.
Yes.
In second place, with a score of 89 with 3 points, is EJ Stardew Valley, 89. There is a tie for third place. And that is a tie between both of Steve's games, Apex Legends and F122, which both received an 81. You received... Now, this is interesting. I want to litigate this here. Well, I was going to say, because usually we do, if there's a tie, we give points to both of the people who tied, but you tied yourself. I think we give him 4 points.
Points for both games. Yeah.
Okay, great. Easy decision. And then with the 1 point in fourth place, a 79, that is Nick with Cook Serve Delicious 2.
Oh, I thought that did better than that.
Yeah, Story of Seasons down at a 76. But it's better than a no answer.
In our hearts.
Please give me a game. Nick, you're picking first, followed by Steve, followed by EJ with the back-to-back. Please give me a game that involves taking shots. Nick, you are choosing first.
A lot of games to choose from. This is the most open-ended that we've gotten in a while.
My game is so not going to be here by the time you guys get to me.
I'm going to say The Last of Us Part 1.
The Last of Us Part 1 is the one you want.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Are we allowing ports, remakes, and director's cuts in this game, Chris? Does that count? Are we banning these tags?
I am searching exactly what is given to me.
All right.
All right, let's see who's picking next. Steve, what are you picking?
Red Dead Redemption 2.
Nailed it.
I believe you can take literal shots of alcohol in that game too. Not to mention the, shooty shots.
Is this me with back-to-back?
It's you back-to-back.
Let's go Tears of the Kingdom. And then shots.
Everybody.
There hasn't been a good NBA game in a decade, at least. 2K13 might have been the last positively reviewed one, but that would have come out the end of 2012, so it'd be pre-Open Critic. 17 is well regarded. Screw it. NBA 2K 2017. I think it's Kevin Durant on the cover.
It is Paul George. No moral point for you.
Oh, wow. Well,
With
Paul George is 2017.
Steve, back to you.
I'm stretching the franchise, maybe, because I'm going to say Grand Theft Auto 5.
That works.
Double dip on my Rockstar.
We know he's going to win this category, guys.
Nick, your last pick.
you can use a bow in Elden Ring.
This one is so vague, it's almost just like pick the best game. Because
Right.
Yeah.
there'll be a way to connect it.
I wanted to leave some of these a little more open. Okay, give me a second to tabulate.
Was it Chris's first chance at hosting Critical Hits that the theme ended up being Fantasy Critic?
Yes. And nobody guessed it, and some of the categories were frustrating. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to course correct a little bit here. I'm going to read the scores from this round, and then I'm going to read the themes for the first 3 rounds back to you and give you a 30-second opportunity to guess the theme. But first, scores from question 3. In first place, a tie, both receiving 96. It is Steve with Red Dead Redemption 2 and EJ with Tears of the Kingdom.
Tears of the Kingdom did better than Elden Ring.
In second place, Speak of the Devil with 95. It's Elden Ring. Nick receiving the 3 points for Elden Ring.
It was a 96 for a solid week or two.
It was. Third place, receiving 2 points with a 92 is Steve with Grand Theft Auto 5. Loaded category. And in fourth, receiving 1 point with a score of 88, it's EJ with NBA 2K17. The Last of Us Part 1 and 82.
Wow. What?
Shocking. I know. I literally, everything I could do to not like react to that in real time, because I thought for sure that would have been the higher scored version of that game. 82.
What?
82. What?
Yeah, The Last of Us Remastered is the one you wanted to say. Or The Last of Us Part 2.
Oh.
God.
Steve even tried to throw you a bone there. He's like, part 1? Are you sure?
Metroid Prime Remaster got a 94, but The Last of Us Part 1 got an 82.
I agree that Prime
EJ.
Remastered should have been closer to 82 than 94. That's for goddamn sure.
I was thinking the other way, but okay.
All right. At this time, I'm going to read back the categories from rounds 1 through 3 and then give you an opportunity to guess. Wait for my go to start guessing. The 3 categories so far have been games that get better the more people that play, games that involve seasons, and games that involve taking shots. 30 seconds on the clock. Go.
Is it Fantasy Critic again?
It's regular fantasy football or fantasy sports in general.
basketball.
Yeah.
A television.
Something related to photography.
The reason John Moran gets suspended the next time.
Game of Thrones.
Oh, boy. I got nothing.
Time.
24, the TV show with Jack Bauer.
No, time. Okay, I need a second to manually tab the totals from these first 3 rounds. So y'all talk amongst yourselves for a couple minutes.
So you said we're doing 3 rounds and then 3 bonus rounds. I can only assume the bonus rounds are single answer instead of double answer. Sorry,
Talk
you're
amongst
tabulating.
yourselves. I need to focus.
I'm trying to figure this out.
No, I think we're doing a get the closest score for this
Oh, for
this
the
next
bonus
one.
round.
That'd be my
Okay.
guess.
All right.
That's my assumption with the paper that I have my tally marks for my score.
Keep it quick, keep it clean. I like that. Yeah, Critical Hits is always a lot of us sitting here pondering intently, but it edits down well.
And then missing the obvious answers.
Yeah.
And then hearing it and going, oh, what the fuck?
yeah.
Red Dead Redemption. That was right in front of me.
Wait, what was Red Dead score?
94, I think. It was real high. It was like similar to God of War, and that came out same year. I was trying to be like, I wonder if you drink in Baldur's Gate 3, because that is also, I know, was the highest scored open critic game.
That would have been a
there.
good answer, I'm sure. You can do just about anything you want in Baldur's Gate 3, so.
Yeah, exactly. So I know there's probably archery and stuff, but I just didn't do it.
Steve, did you play Baldur's Gate?
No, I have a list of games which are this game is so long that, and I'm not particularly interested, that like maybe I'll get to it, and if enough people tell me that I don't have a choice, basically I'll eventually get to it. And the 2 that are the top of there is Baldur's Gate 3 and Persona 5. Like those games are 100-hour games. Maybe I'll get to them one day. The fact that I've finished the 3 Souls games I wanted to play Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Elden Ring, leaves open my. It's become a tradition to play a super long game in February. So maybe next February, Baldur's Gate 3 or Persona 5 will happen.
Yeah, those like too important to not have an opinion on kind of games. I get that.
All right, friends. I've tabulated the first 3 rounds results currently. We have a close game.
Love
In
that.
first at the moment with 14 points is our guest, Steve. In second place with 13 points is EJ. And Nick in third with 9. So we are still very closely knotted here as we move into categories 4 through 6.
What can I say? Second only to the best.
Welcome to the Uno Reverse
Oh, shoot.
rounds. In these rounds, I will read you 4 games and ask you to rank them as you believe they are from highest to lowest in 60 seconds. You will receive 1 point per correct placement. So if you correctly put the highest rated game in slot number 1, you get a point. You get 1 bonus point for having all 4 games correctly ranked. You can earn a 6th point, 1 additional point, if you guess the theme that unites those 4 games. This is literally backwards, the Uno Reverse round. So once again, I will read you 4 games. You will have 60 seconds to rank them from highest to lowest on your paper. You
I'm gonna need more paper.
can also guess the theme. You will need to write down what you think the theme is, because once y'all start revealing, I want like a paper trail, right? So that nobody's like, oh yeah, that's what I thought. I will be lenient with the theme bonus points. If you're close, I will give it to you. And for the record, for these 3 rounds, I did switch back to Metacritic scores so that I could have access to a broader number of games to draw from. So just be aware of that.
If the Metacritic game is multi-platform, are we taking the highest platform or the lowest platform?
Highest. Thank you for clarifying. Yes, we always default to highest platform score to give folks the best opportunity to win.
So you said rank, theme, and...
That's it. Rank and theme. Put
Rank,
them in
theme,
order.
okay.
If you get all 4 of them right, you get an additional point. If you guess the theme right, you get an additional point. Okay. I will read the 4 games twice and then start the timer. Category 4. Here are your 4 games. Balatro, Chocobo Grand Prix, Yu-Gi-Oh! Dungeon Dice Monsters, and Grand Theft Auto Vice City.
This is fucked up, Chris.
It's all there, Chris. It's all there for you, buddy.
I cannot read whatever those hieroglyphs are, EJ. Okay, I'll just go round robin. I'll look at your cards. Well, I'll do this. I'll give you what the order is, and then we'll look at themes. From highest to lowest, the correct order is Grand Theft Auto Vice City, which has a 95, Balatro, which has a 91, and now the 2 that I'm sure none of you have a fucking clue which is going to be worse than the other. Third, Yu-Gi-Oh! Dungeon Dice Monsters 67.
Yeah! Look at that!
And Chocobo Grand Prix with a 63. Anybody sweep?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, baby.
Nick.
I got 2 backwards.
Okay, so you got 2 out of the 4. What did you think the theme was, EJ?
It was gambling.
Nick?
I said games with betting.
Games with
Games with
betting.
betting,
And
okay.
Steve?
I said games that involve cards.
I'm going to give it to gambling and betting. I'm not going to give it to cards, and that is because the theme specifically was Las Vegas. Viva Las Vegas. Vice
Does
City.
Chocobo GP have cards?
That's not where GTA Vice City is set, though. It's not set in Vegas.
That is true.
It's set in Miami.
It's Vice, I guess, more broadly.
Wow,
I'll give everybody that one. I'll give everybody that one. All right. This is going to tab way faster because I have this formulaed out.
I guess the Chocobo's not set in Vegas either. But
Well, no, but I was like horse racing. Like
I've never been to Vegas. I can't tell. I don't know if we're there or not.
Gambling is probably okay. Fair enough.
I'm gonna give you all a point for the theme because I think you were close enough that I did say I was like I'm gonna be pretty lenient with the theme. So the theme
I don't
was
know if there are cards in Chocobo. To be fair, I thought that maybe there's like a card. mechanic for, I don't know.
No, I was like horse racing, greyhound racing. That's the closest I could get. There's a NASCAR series in Vegas, I believe. Also,
I appreciate that you're keeping Chris honest, Steve. It is a full-time job on the Content Crusade podcast.
Whoa. Here are your 4 titles for Category 5: Assassin's Creed Black Flag, Animal Crossing New Horizons, Wave Race 64, and Dead or Alive Extreme 2.
Locked.
Thank you, Locked.
Locked.
Thank you, Locked.
Thanks, Rob.
All right, I'm good.
All right, the correct order was Wave Race 64 with a 92.
What?
Ooh.
I know. Animal Crossing New Horizons with a 90. EJ is fully shook. He's gone. He is
I knew Wave
gobsmacked.
Race was good, but I didn't know it was 90 plus.
Seriously. Assassin's Creed Black Flag with an 88 and Dead or Alive Extreme 2 with a 53.
Wow, I put Wave Race number 3. No
Wow.
So did
brother.
I.
Yeah, so
I had Wave Race at 2.
Scratch through the ones you had in incorrect positions.
Yeah, I've got 2 right,
Okay.
and I know that I nailed the theme.
I extra crossed one that I shouldn't have. I got 1 right. I got DOA Extreme 2 at the bottom.
That's
right.
all
yeah.
I got as well.
Okay, so 1-1. Nick got 2, and Nick, what'd you think the theme was?
Beach vibes.
Correct. The theme is beach. EJ, what'd you put?
Island.
Island. I will allow it. Steve, what'd you put?
Island's all beach.
Put games that involve water.
I will take it. I will totally take it. Yeah, the theme overall was beach. The theme is beach.
Thank you, Ken.
You're very welcome. In honor of the Oscars, just a little nod. Also the theme's not Oscars. Don't guess that. Okay. Category 6, our final category. I almost read the theme to you because I'm so used to doing this the correct order. And I was like, that would be so sad. Here are your 4 titles: Grim Fandango, Pacific Drive, The Last of Us, Final Fantasy 15,
The Last of Us.
the original PlayStation 3 release.
Okay, I have to ask. There's been free releases with that name.
Locked? Question mark?
15 seconds.
I'm good.
Okay.
I didn't like this one, Chris.
The correct order is The Last of Us with a 95, Grim Fandango with a 94, Final Fantasy 15
All
with an
right.
83, and Pacific Drive with a 78. Any sweeps?
Yeah.
Full sweep.
Yeah.
2
Good
sweeps.
for you guys. I got 2.
You got 2.
What'd you switch?
I switched Final Fantasy and Grim.
Grim Fandango, surprisingly strong.
Great game.
What theme did you write down, Nick?
Road trip.
Road trip? Steve, what'd you write?
I wrote games that involve a road trip.
Okay, EJ?
I put Journey, but I was picturing the Final Fantasy 15, the boy band in the car, like, you know,
Yeah.
they're going from one place to the other.
I'll give it to you, but the theme was road trip.
I didn't know Grim Fandango was a road trip.
Oh, yeah.
I saw the other 3 and I was like, I gotta go with it.
I did not know either until it was suggested to me by Brandon Gustafson for this category. Shout out Brandon Gustafson. I just
Is
said
he
his
our
name
ghost?
2
Do we have
different
a
ways.
ghost?
No, there's no ghost. No ghost this time.
Okay.
But he was my shadow helper when I was like, I need 2 more games with a road trip real bad. Like I put
Nice.
Final Fantasy and The Last of Us down immediately, and then when I'm stumped. Okay, at this time, this is the current. This is a literally insane tally prior to giving y'all a chance to guess the full theme for today's installment of Critical Hits. In first place with 25 points right now is Steve. In second place with 24 is both Nick and EJ.
Okay.
Which means that after I read back the categories and you wait for my go, and if any of you are able to guess the theme, you will be guaranteed to clinch this installment of Critical Hits if you guess the theme for today's game. So, once again, the categories were games that get better the more people that play, games that involve seasons, games that involve taking shots, Las Vegas, beach, and road trip. 30 seconds begins now. Go.
Spring break.
That is Nick with the winner
Wow.
immediately.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. That's clever.
That
I
is
got it
good.
as soon as I got road trip. I was like, this spring break is happening
I
soon.
got spring
It's
break on
Chris's
the
mind.
brain. I am so ready to get the
Yes.
fuck out of here for a week. If I get the fuck out of here, I mean do nothing but play Rebirth until my eyes bleed and Celeste so that we can talk about it on the top 100. Nick, congratulations.
My heart is in my chest.
The final tally is Nick with 27 points, our guest Steve with 25, and EJ with 24. Easily the closest and most competitive installment of Critical Hits that we have ever had. Congratulations, gentlemen, and thank you for playing.
The Uno reverse was a great round.
good.
That was a lot of fun.
Thank you. I've been waiting to do this. Thank you for that affirmation. I'm going to carry that with me all day. This has been a long one. Steve, again, I want to thank you for coming on, rapping with us, talking about video games, talking about Fantasy Critic, being so generous with your time, playing this crazy fucking game show that we love to play. Thank you, man. You're welcome anytime.
Yeah, I had a great time. This was great. It's just a long episode. You're right about that.
It'll edit down. We'll lose some time for sure. But Steve, thanks again, man. It was fascinating to get insight not only into Fantasy Critic and sort of the back end, but also just your insight into games, what you've been playing, and some of your thoughts on the industry. I feel like I could have 100 more questions for you and keep doing this. So thank you again. Again, 3 hours plus. This is a long one. So thank you, man.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Console Crusade Podcast. Join us on the Discord. You can find the links to all of our socials at solo.to/console crusade.
fantasycritic.games. Patreon.com/fantasycritic.
Support this man. Support what he's doing. Support this website. It is amazing. We have had 4 years of love with it. I'm literally going to go subscribe immediately when we get off this call. I can't believe I haven't already.
Third only to the best.